Saturday. It's not the best Saturday for being outdoors, so it makes me feel a little better. And then the Tar Heels don't play till 4 o'clock, so we'll be through by then. So
let's hope so.
Yeah, we hope so. Alex, why don't we go around and you introduce our guests?
Great, be happy to. And Mayor, if you don't mind, would it be all right if I introduce Geraldine and then maybe she could help introduce our guest?
You do it any way you want.
All right, great. So let me start out by and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here on a Saturday morning. I'm excited about getting started here. I'd like to first introduce Ms. Geraldine Gardner. She's going to help facilitate our expert panel. Geraldine's the Executive Director of the Central Ina Regional Council of Government. She previously worked at the GMF, the United States, where she worked as the Director of Urban and Regional Policy. She focused on working between policymakers from US and European cities to work on mutual issues. And prior to that, she led the successful completion of over 18 neighborhood and revitalization plans that helped reshape the physical landscape of Washington, D.C. And her background focused on the intersection of economic development, strategy, community work, and physical planning. She's got her master's degree in UCLA and her bachelor's from NYU, and was previously an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. And I'm tickled that Geraldine can serve as our facilitator. She's just got extensive background, and normally someone of her stature bringing her in, she's spending a lot of work with me prepping for this. It would be definitely thousands of dollars, but because we're members of Central Ina, she's doing it for free. So we appreciate it, Geraldine. Can I turn it over to you?
Sure, Alex. Good morning, everyone. It's really a delight to be with you this morning and to help support the objectives that Alex and the mayor have for your retreat that you're spending your Saturday focusing on the future of Stallings. So thank you for allowing me to help guide a portion of your meeting. So I'm delighted to have with us here an equally, in fact, probably more illustrious panel. We have, let's see if I can find them here on my screen. All right, so you all should have the bios from our panelists, but let me just quickly point them out. So we have Eric Thomas. Eric, maybe wave your hand. Mac McCarley, Michelle Nance, and Jeff Emery. And we're gonna actually have them introduce themselves as we get started here in just a moment. So the first, Alex, do you want us to start with their introductions and the opening question, or do you want to kind of set the context a little bit first?
Sure. Let me take 30 seconds just to set the context. So the town has been working on starting a downtown really for years, either primarily or as a secondary effect, and done a lot of work. And really this in 2021, the council really set it as one of the top priorities. And so we've been working on trying to implement that, create a vision, and work on an action plan. And the council wanted to dive deeper into the action plan to figure out, hey, is this a good plan, or do we need to change anything? And really give us some expertise on whether we're moving in the right direction, or if not, whether we need to change anything. So that's the context of the panel. Yeah, thank you, Geraldine.
Great. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Michelle Nance, to introduce herself. And the opening question that I'd like the panel to share with you, or to address as they introduce themselves, is, what, for you panelists, what is the key ingredient to a successful downtown? So we're going to start with Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see familiar faces on the council. And it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm Michelle Nance. I'm the Regional Planning Director at Central Ina. I've been here for about 9 years, work with communities all across the region on issues related to land use and transportation and economic development, and really how all of those work together to create vibrant communities. Previously, I was over in the city of Gastonia, really started as what I call a cub planner So kind of doing all types of things, but ended up as planning director. Also spent some time up in the Triad area with communities there, specifically the city of High Point, and then worked for another regional organization doing work in a lot of small communities. So it's a pleasure to be here. Have had some experience in the town assisting on planning issues, and it's so glad to be back. Thank you.
Thanks,
Oh,
Michelle. Jeff,
and the
why don't you
question.
take? Yeah.
And the
Yes,
question
the
that you
question.
asked. So I'm gonna start out with one that may not come to mind, at first glance, but I like to think that you really need to create what I call a positive vibe that attracts people to the place. So you want a place that feels safe, where people feel connected to one another, and like it's the place to be. So almost like the cool factor. But really, how do you do that? It's promotion has always been important for any downtown, but in the age of Instagram, it's about strategic marketing and communications about your place. So that creates that whole, vibe around the downtown. And it's an important piece that's, it's not brick and mortar, but it is such an important part of creating that, energy that you need to attract people and investment.
Thanks, Michelle. It's a great point to kick us off with. Jeff? Oop, you're muted, Jeff. We had our first one of the meeting.
That wasn't a very good start. I apologize. My name is Jeff Emery, and I work for the North Carolina Department of Commerce. I work for the Division of North Carolina Main Street and Rural Planning Center. I serve as the Community Economic Development Planner for the Southwest Prosperity Zone. That is a 10-county area. I've been with NC Commerce for almost 4 years. In my first career, I served as a city and town manager for approximately 29 years. My last city manager's job, I was the city manager for the city of Lincolnton in Lincoln County for about 18 and a half years. I still live in Lincolnton. So I have spent my entire career working in the public sector. Spent a lot of time as city manager dealing with downtown issues. I feel that a downtown truly is the heart of a successful town. And I definitely commend you for making this one of your most important issues that you're dealing with. To me, successful downtowns provide a series of opportunities for everyone. Retail, dining, recreation. I was in a town just this past weekend that had a park right in their downtown that was just incredibly vital to their downtown. And I mention that because I know you've got that as well, which I think is a big plus. So I would say, to me, downtowns are places that provide a series of opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Eric, we're going to go over to you. You're next in line.
Sure. Hi, good morning, all. My name is Eric Thomas. I'm a senior project manager with the Development Finance Initiative. We are a program out of UNC Chapel Hill School of Government. We advise local governments. We've worked all across the state of North Carolina advising local governments on downtown revitalization projects focused around public-private partnership and commercial real estate development. Communities across North Carolina on helping them to think through partnership structures for public-private partnerships around downtown or town center developments. So I'm excited to bring a little bit of that knowledge, of that experience that I've had working with other communities on helping them think through their downtowns. What I think is critical for or downtown, or what it can really become, is essentially a destination for the community, all members of your community, but it's a place for people of the community to exchange ideas, for a place for innovative development to occur, for a place for congregation of your community, a destination. I've heard heart of your community, and I think that says a lot of it also. But I think it's really this opportunity to have people in your community come together that maybe would never sort of rub shoulders. And I know we're in the era of COVID, maybe not rub shoulders right now specifically, but an area where sort of ideas can be exchanged, partnerships can be structured, relationships formed. I think that's what downtowns, what I think about for downtowns.
Thank you, Eric. And last but certainly not least, Mac.
Good morning. My name is Mac McCarley. My career started as a lawyer lobbyist for the North Carolina League of Municipalities. Next, I was city attorney in Greenville, North Carolina for 13 years. After that, 17 years as city attorney in Charlotte. And I've been with Parker Poe now for about 8.5 years. Most of my clients are local governments. I think my answer to the question of what's most important for downtown is that there needs to be a very clear and managed vision for the downtown area, and that vision needs to match the community that it's in so that it feels like an integrated center of that community. Geraldine?
Thank you, Mac. So as council and staff and guests, you can see that we've got a very experienced panel with decades long of track record and experience in helping communities think about downtown. But Mac gave us a very important transition point to this conversation, which is that all of us are outsiders to your community. We're here to just give a perspective, looking into all the work that you've been doing. But certainly you all know your community and you know your constituents and you know the most important values and priorities from their point of view and also from your point of view as leaders. So what we're going to be doing today is just kind of giving you some food for thought. I think that's what Alex has charged us to do, to offer a fresh perspective, not from the point of view of telling you what to do by any means, but more about giving some inspiration, some other perspectives from the development community, from the real estate point of view, from the planning view, so that you can consider this input as you continue to make strategic decisions for your town. So we spent about, just over an hour yesterday with Alex, and he briefed the panel on your downtown action plan. We looked at maps, we talked about issues, and what we have decided to do for about the next 30 minutes or so is going to engage, the panel is going to engage in a virtual SWOT analysis. And for those of you who know what SWOT means, it is a tool that we can use to really objectively analyze the strengths of a plan, the weaknesses of a plan, the opportunities that you all can leverage to implement this plan, and the potential threats. These could be external threats, things in the environment that might influence how your plan could be implemented. So we're going to kind of step through this analysis, and what we hope to do after we complete the SWOT analysis is to talk about with the panel what are some of the recommendations that they might have for you all to consider to leverage those strengths and opportunities and to navigate or address those weaknesses or threats that have been identified. So that's really the flow of the next portion of our conversation. And we invite the council, to observe this conversation. If you have questions, please hold them to the end, because we're going to bring you back into the conversation after we go through this analysis that we're going to do. So those are kind of the ground rules. Feel free to put questions into the chat, and I'll go back to those when we get to the Q&A session. All right, panel. Alex, if I'm able, looks like I can share my screen. So as the panel's talking, I just want, everyone to see some of the notes that I'm writing down, just in transparency. So we're going to start with the strengths of the Downtown Action Plan. And Jeff, you are our lead-off commentator for the panel. So when you're ready, please share just a couple of strengths that you see to get us started.
Thank you very much. And I want to first of all commend council, mayor and staff, because I think in the preliminary work I've looked at, there are several strengths to the plan you have, and I commend you for that. And I just want to touch on a few of these. One of the first things I see, I like that in your proposed area, your footprint of your downtown. I think the fact that you have town facilities, town-owned properties is a big plus. You have your town hall, actually a couple buildings, maybe a public works facility, and a park. And it appears to me that your park is a location where a lot of town activities take place, a lot of important activities. Some folks mentioned a gathering spot for the town, and I think you have that. And I would just advise to don't skimp on taking care of those facilities. I think that taking care of what you own is extremely important. And when you have other developers looking at the possibility of your downtown, it's going to be important to see what the town's commitment is with their own facilities. You have a streetscape plan. I think it will be important to invest to implement that plan. We see survey after survey where people indicate the importance of walkability and things such as trees. I think having that, I think getting your streetscape plan implemented will be very, very important. Looks like your plan has ample parking both off street and on street. I think that is a plus. I think you have opportunities, properties for a potential for public-private partnerships. And I think that's going to be critical to the success of your development of a town. And I think you've identified property to do that. You have been able to purchase some other properties within the footprint. And I think you are continuing to purchase other properties, which I think is definitely a strength of the plan. You are looking at this from a mixed use perspective, which I think is good. I like the fact that you have accounted for retail and residential and government facilities and various type of uses. I think that's all critical. And Geraldine, I think you said 2 or 3 for each category for now. So I'm going to stop there. And if I need to come back to any, I can.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. That's a great start. So rest of the panel, what other strengths do you see about the current plan that you'd add to this list?
I might chime in and just say that I applaud you all for the land acquisition policy that sort of is in place currently, that you're doing that outreach to these private property owners to gauge their interests and to essentially start to get some of these key properties under contract. Whether you think you are or not, you are in the real estate development business as local governments. And by essentially starting this process of either gauging the interests of the property owners on whether they're willing to sell or not, or getting properties under contract or under option for future purchase, you are essentially sending the signal that you're serious about this, that there's confidence in your market. It's a signal to private developers that you want to see this happen. So I think that is a really key step in realizing your vision, showing your seriousness about acquiring properties. And I think I'll talk a little bit more about that as threats later on if you can't secure properties that are key to your vision also. So that's something that I saw as a strength within your concept right now. And one other thing that Alex mentioned yesterday was this idea that, and knowledge that downtowns aren't just a couple months of making investment and seeing your downtown realized. This is years of development and work to realize your downtown, which means sustained commitment to both the vision, but also making investments in your downtown as well. So it's not just sort of a one-off, you realize it, but this is a years of development with years of partnership and years of investment to realize ultimately this vision that you have.
Thank
So
you,
I
Eric.
applaud you all for knowing that.
Eric touched on a critical piece, and that is there is elected governing body support for this. As I understand it, this came out as the top priority for the council at the last retreat. That kind of support really translates to the market as if you're interested, we're interested too.
Geraldine, just for clarity, you're going to save this and send this out to Alex afterward? Okay. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yep. All right.
I
So,
also wanted to-
That's a great, yeah, Michelle, go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to commend the community as well for looking at, the important decision to create a core destination. You've got such great potential there and have already done so much in terms of the town hall, the new town hall and the park. And so building on that to create a destination for a downtown is really to be commended. And also to really look at it as a bite-sized chunk. You don't have a 40-acre area that you're, trying to develop. You actually took a fairly small chunk of this to try to focus on. And that shows prioritization, and that's really important because the work ahead is and will be difficult, but that's why your commitment to this is so important.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. All right, we're going to move on. There's always two sides of the coin where you've got strengths, you have weaknesses. I'm a glass half full kind of person, so I like to think of them as opportunities, but we already have an opportunity square in our matrix, so we'll just kind of stick with the traditional phrasing of weakness. Mac, you're going to kick us off with this part of the analysis. What do you see as some things that could be improved upon or tweaked in the current plan?
I think there are three high-level weaknesses, and it's interesting that Michelle talked about the micro area focus. I think the micro area focus could also end up being a weakness. It's a market issue. I'm not sure that the plan is big enough to attract market interest. Most developers are going to look at the question of, can I create a development in this space that will return on my investment? And in this particular case, we've got public facilities around it, but there aren't a lot of rooftops around it. And the old phrase in economic development is that retail follows rooftops. And there may be a market weakness to this plan in that we're trying to put retail in a space that doesn't have a residential base to support it. So I think market reality may be the first potential weakness for the plan. The second is that there is a fair amount of undeveloped or underdeveloped land very close to this. The old John Deere implement site, and then just across Stallings Road from that, there are a fair number of large undeveloped or underdeveloped tracts that if they're developed for inappropriate uses, they could undermine the vision of creating that central core place. I can imagine what would happen if the Deere property and the old bank building next to it turned into a convenience store with gas pumps, and the parcels right across from it turned into a self-storage unit. I just think that kind of risk of inappropriate development could undermine the quality of the vision for placemaking in this micro focus area. The third thing is that if you believe the micro focus may be a weakness, then the third issue might be that the vision is too small and underfunded. And that to make this work, we might want to look at a larger area with a broader focus and make sure that nothing around us is going to detract from it. So the vision might actually be too small and underfunded. Those are the 30,000 foot views of potential weaknesses.
Thank you, Mac. Other panel members want to chime in?
Yeah, Mac, I think you touched on some key points there with in terms of the weaknesses. One thing that I would see right now is the lack of site control as a weakness to the vision, where you're essentially, if you start to put major significant public investments in here in this area and show your concept vision as we want to see this occur, that's only going to raise the value of these private properties as the plan matures over time, making it more challenging to acquire these properties. So that's one thing that I noticed. And then another, kind of talking about the market realities of your vision, I think there's this idea of financial feasibility from the private development perspective that hasn't gone into this, maybe into the overall concept to date right now of, is this a concept that has sort of a market reality to it in terms of private developers would want to do this project. And I think that it hasn't been necessarily tested on, would this project be able to be financed from a private development perspective? What kind of partnerships would need to occur? What kind of investments? Obviously, this is a vision to get people coalesced around and supportive of a downtown, but I think there's an important piece here of, is this financially feasible from a private development perspective that hasn't gone in to, is this an actually buildable project?
Geraldine, I just
Excellent.
a second to make a comment. What Eric just told you is the kind of things that Eric and the DFI program at the School of Government do all day, every day. They help communities figure out exactly the things that Eric is pointing out. I think at some point it might be worth tasking Alex and the staff with talking to DFI to see if Stallings and this downtown project is an appropriate project for a DFI engagement.
Mac, that's great. And we're going to get to those specific types of recommendations and solutions in just a moment. And I just want to acknowledge a couple of comments that came into the chat and just prompt the panel to think on this when we get to that solutions conversations. But Michelle, going to be interested in your thoughts on rezoning and this sort of interplay between the micro focus area and that being strategic, but also Mac's point about the bigger area and the weakness. So just a prompt that we want to come back to that. Jeff, Michelle, do you want to contribute at all to the weaknesses list before we move on?
I would just note that, even though this is a vision plan and it can't have all the detail that you would ever expect to have on a more, engineering type plan, there are some key elements that I just wanted to point out that even though they may not need to be on paper right now, you just need to be thinking through. And those are those core community issues such as where's the trash going to go? That it sounds so micro, but it's one of those issues. Talk to any downtown development manager, and it's those types of practical issues that really come into play. Also thinking about your utilities and where they go. There is nothing worse for a community than to invest in streetscape, and then it has to be dug back up to put in a conduit, whether it's water, sewer, electrical, taps, oil, fat, and grease, whatever it is, it sends the wrong message. So a lot of that really needs to be thought through. When I look at the plan, I don't see the space for some of these things, either between buildings. And so it's just something to be thinking about. I also think the transition between Monroe Road and, I guess the grandness of that corridor and what it's proposed to be, thinking through, if it's going to have turn lanes and four different lanes with turns as it approaches the intersection of, I guess, Stallings Road and Monroe Road, how that transitions down into the on-street parking, I think is a critical issue to be thinking about. Again, maybe like right off the screen here, but it's something you need to be thinking about and how that changes the character of what you're trying to go for. I think not having residential as a core component, whether it's, you know, third or fourth story residential or adjacent residential that's actually planned in, I think we've heard this from other panelists, could be an issue. Downtown vibe, which I mentioned before, is you got to have people. And so not only for the market to actually create the buildings and create the investment, but once it's there, you got to have the people to create that energy. So I'll stop there.
The only thing I
Michelle.
see, and this may even come under the opportunity, I think at some point, I know there have been discussions with property owners, but maybe at some point you may want to do a more citizen-wide type of survey about what type of features you would want in your downtown area. I know in some other case studies I looked at of forming or developing a downtown or central meeting space, there was some pretty in-depth surveying or interview type activities, seeing what the key components were within a particular community. I don't know that the towns had maybe the time to do that yet, because I know a lot of the details are going to come, but that may be, you may want some more citizen input as far as what's important to the population as a whole. That's the only thing I would add.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And especially if projects have to come before the council for any kind of discretionary approval, the citizens will, proactive engagement will be helpful for that. All right, we're going to shift our focus from the plan itself to thinking about those factors that influence the success of implementation. What are those opportunities that are happening maybe around the town, or some of the external factors that may influence its success? So I want to start off with Michelle on this one. So Michelle, what do you see as the plan implementation opportunities?
So we've talked a lot about bringing people into the town and into the core, the downtown, and obviously residential is a key component of that. But there's another piece, and that is bike and pedestrian traffic. You have a greenway plan, and tying this downtown plan to your greenway initiative, I think is going to be just of vital importance, because that way you're, with Stallings being a very linear community, I mean, it just makes perfect sense to be able to pull people in to the downtown. And I mean, doesn't everybody want to bike or walk to, restaurant and then be able to, walk or bike back home? I mean, that's just, every community just wants that so bad. And you're really set up to make that happen. As part of that, once you get the greenway connection in place, you need to create metrics. So think, the development communities will want those metrics. How many people are using the greenway? How many people are using the park on a given weekend? What do your festivals bring in? And you probably already have some of that information. That's going to be key in providing to the development community, even as an interim measure before you get the residential in. I think an opportunity is to really start thinking now about what I'll call the downtown dressing. And what I mean by that is, your streetscape banners, your coordinated street furniture. So your bike racks, trash cans, benches. I mean, again, it seems micro, but this starts building up that energy and an idea that, we're really moving in this direction. It's a way to keep that momentum going. To be thinking about your outdoor dining, and which I'm pretty sure you'll probably want. It's a core component of downtowns, but that has to be thought through in terms of where that sits, and any permitting that you want to go with that. I guess also I would think about just the greater transit projects that are going on. There's so much excitement right now with the Silver Line connecting east of downtown, into not only Matthews, but future connections into Union County. there's a lot of excitement there. And even though it may be a long-term initiative, the economic development opportunities are massive. So to be thinking about downtown Stallings as a core destination on those stops is a real key. And I've heard this all around the region. People want to live in a small community with access to maybe the sports and the culture and even their jobs, being somewhere else, but they want to be in the small town. That's where they want to raise their families and live. You have such an opportunity to do that with this program. So, and I would advise also things that you can be doing in the interim, just an opportunity, and maybe you already do, is just, having food trucks that come in, at your park, and just thinking about a way to sell the vision to the community. Engagement was brought up before. You can do that at the festivals, at the gatherings that you already have at the park.
Thanks, Michelle. Anyone want to contribute to this list? Opportunities?
Michelle, that was great. That was very well thought out in terms of the opportunities. And I can only just build off of what you were communicating in terms of the high growth. I mean, this whole Charlotte metro area with the Silver Line, with the hospital investment that's in your community, with Old Monroe and the high traffic volume corridors that you have, those are all assets to build off of and opportunities. And particularly now with potentially this work from home model as sticking around or being more permanent, Michelle nailed it, that people are thinking now, hey, I don't need to be in downtown Charlotte if my job is in downtown Charlotte. I think there's now an opportunity to think about, hey, I'd rather live in a place with higher quality of life, and I can I can commute in one day a week, go to the Silver Line if I need to be in person one day a week, and then the other 4 I can work from home. So there's this great opportunity now with people that are seeing more rural communities as higher quality of life, more affordable. And so I think that's something to capture and something to think about, particularly with how well integrated Stallings will be in terms of connectivity with the Silver Line and also a recent hospital investment and also Old Monroe. Now, that's also getting to one of the threats is Old Monroe, whether that's going to limit access into the downtown. But I think those opportunities are definitely there.
A very practical opportunity is that the John Deere implement property is on the market. If the town wanted to have control of that, there are 2 obvious answers. One is to rezone it so that it's a little bit more restrictive about what could go there, and the other is to purchase it.
Jeff, anything on opportunities?
This may be a little bit further down the road, but a lot of towns have done some unique things with local incentives, maybe further down when you get development. And I know that can be tricky, and I would advise everyone to stay in close contact with your legal representation. Mac may have some comments on that, but I do think there are some opportunities to help your downtown growth with maybe some incentives that maybe the local government could participate in at some point.
Absolutely. I think your former town, Lincolnton, did a lot with using local government resources to incentivize development downtown. So it's a good suggestion. All right, lots of good questions coming into the chat from council. So we're going to get to those in just a few minutes, but want to shift our focus to our final quadrant here, which is the potential threats to implementation. And Eric, you're starting off with this one, and you already teased up one on Old Monroe Road, but take it away.
Sure. I've sort of thought through a couple of threats to potentially the vision that you all have crafted for your downtown. One is changing markets. You've crafted a vision that is based on maybe a current market condition, but you always have to think about what changing markets may mean. And that means maybe flexibility in your overall plan, flexibility in your overall vision. Another that I've experienced personally is potential of changing boards or changing councils. Now, I don't want to kind of pose that to you all right here, but I've experienced when a board turns over, there potentially loses a lot of momentum for projects. So think about that in terms of your downtown. Whether I know right now, what I think is a great strength is you had unanimous support from this current board for pushing downtown as a priority. Now, I think that's an opportunity to capitalize on that, to push it forward. But I've experienced when boards turn over that you can have a lot of challenges keeping the momentum up for certain projects. A threat, the lack of site control. I think Mac has hit on that. That's a threat that I see as an imminent threat to the success of your overall downtown, is not having site control over these key properties that I think, obviously your vision, if it was market ready, a private developer would have come in and done this project already. And that's why there's maybe a need for public-private partnerships. But with all these transit and multimodal access into this area, I think property is going to be thought of as, let's see this as an opportunity to acquire properties for storage facilities or things that are not complementary to your downtown core. So I'd say that as a significant threat is not having control and the ability to control your vision for your communities downtown. And then the last one I kind of wanted to just touch on as a threat was this idea of Old Monroe's realignment. I know a super street maybe isn't super compatible with downtown. Now, it seems like there is going to be some access off of that into your downtown, but I think it's going to require some significant signage or something to make sure that people are directed into your downtown from this road that's going to become essentially a highway, and to ensure with NCDOT or whoever is managing that there's going to be significant access into your site. I've worked in another community where transitioning a highway from limited access to without exits and on-ramps has essentially killed a project. And so something to be aware of there with your road infrastructure that's coming in place. So that's kind of my initial takes on threats.
Thank you, Eric. And I think we want to come back and get the panel's opinion on how to navigate both that turnover question as well as the curious, Eric, when we get to the Q&A, how do we build in flexibility? What does that look like in a vision plan, to Michelle's point? So, all right, any other threats that the panel sees to kind of close out our SWOT analysis?
I would just say that why it's also an opportunity, as someone who's lived and managed small towns my entire life, while I totally agree, a lot of people enjoy and really like working and doing things in small towns, there's always that feeling of wanting to leave a small area to go to a larger location to do things. I mean, I know when I was city manager in Lincoln, I would always hear, gosh, I wish we had this, I wish we had that, and we would get this or that, and people would still go to Hickory or Gastonia or even Charlotte to do things. And so I still think sometimes it is a struggle for smaller towns to compete with the appeal of a larger location. And I don't know that anyone on this panel will ever change that, but I see that a lot in smaller towns, that you will always, to some degree, be competing with what is larger or bigger in folks' eyes. So I would just add that for what it's worth.
Right, or potentially other communities that are nearby.
Exactly.
There were a couple comments in the chat around, Mint Hill and some of the other communities that may be a draw because they already have some assets in their downtown that they're building, and at some point the market, can only absorb so much new development. Great. Well, we've got a really wonderful, Mac, yes. You wanted to throw in?
We had one more. Funding. Money.
Yep, absolutely. Bold exclamation point in red italics. Great. Well, this is a really important sort of foundation discussion. And now I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. But would love the panel to let's get a little tactical here, right? So we've allowed ourselves to think about strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats. Putting on your expert hats, what are some of the top things that you would recommend to the council to consider adjusting or accounting for, or follow-on steps from this plan that you think is going to be really important to building on these strengths and opportunities and navigating the weaknesses and threats? So what does that list look like? And anyone can jump in to start.
I'll just start with, even though I think the prioritization of looking at a small area for investment is important, I think not having the zoning regulations in a larger area that would be consistent with your goals could be a problem, and would recommend extending the area out for the zoning to include not only, I would actually go on even to the other side of Monroe Road, and probably up Stallings, at least maybe a half mile, just to be thinking. And if it's residential and you want to stay residential, that's fine. But the areas that you really do anticipate turning over, or there's enough property there that could really, something could come in that could be detrimental to your investment, I would definitely look at that. The other thing I would suggest is thinking about a core committee other than staff or council that becomes a face of the project. There is nothing stronger than having a resident business group that can be the booster club for a project. It really helps out. So, there has to be some education there, and you have to get the right people on the board. And board may be too formal, committee. It needs to be a very diverse committee so that the community sees themselves in that group. Highly respected folks that do economic development, perhaps. It's just an idea, so that you as elected leaders and staff aren't always at the center of the bullseye, right? And I guess the other thing I would look at is just community education about the vision. And this is a long game, as has been talked about before. So thinking about creating a message of what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, how it's going to help the community, being very honest about how long it will likely take, and the fact that it's resource intensive. You just have to be transparent about that and start a program of communication now.
Geraldine, I would say two things. First, we need to move quickly. And the first thing we need to move on is some sort of site control, either through purchase or zoning, so that nothing negative happens right next to our focus site that would undermine the vision. Speed and control.
I would just add that I really, really love Michelle's idea of the formation of some type of, I don't know what you call it, but a committee, some sort of group of champions or whatever, what you want to call it, to maybe be the face of this project. I think that's a fabulous idea. I would just also point out that I think, again, public-private partnerships are going to be critical to this. And I had a manager, when I was doing some research on this project, tell me to just caution anyone that this can be a slow process. I talked to a very successful town in the Raleigh area that told me it took them about 15 years to find the right private partner for what they accomplished in their town. I know that's probably not what anyone wants to hear, but it's not going to happen overnight. And then just, what Mac and Eric have said, that, they're much smarter than I am about this, but they've made me realize how this whole site control situation is very, very critical. And I think we need to definitely listen to them on that subject. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think kind of just tying off here in terms of what sort of going off what Michelle said in terms of this committee that could help inform your decision making and to maybe alleviate some of the pressure or concentrated energy off of you on that committee, some sort of private development experience on that committee that could help inform of, hey, as a developer, this is what I could also see happening in this area, or what I'm seeing from the sort of the market dynamics or the challenges with thinking of just developing a retail corridor as sort of first phase. That may be the most challenging component to build. And that's where I think also it might help inform flexibility around your vision, where we've talked about it kind of a little bit in terms of the bodies, the residential opportunities. Because I think what I'm seeing in terms of communication with developers all around the state is they'd love to build more residential units to satisfy all of the growth that North Carolina, particularly the Charlotte metro area, is experiencing. But right now, this plan doesn't capture that. So in terms of competing with your surrounding communities, that development is going elsewhere. And so that's where if you want to be able to compete with those communities, perhaps providing a little bit more flexibility or less rigidity on terms of lack of multifamily, there might be an opportunity to be a little bit more flexible to attract those investments and those people that are ready with the money to invest and then set it up for realizing your future retail sort of destination. So just something that could be considered of is how much flexibility you all have in terms of product type in your downtown core.
Right. Eric, on that point regarding the committee, this idea of a champions group, I think it's always a really tough balance to find those developer voices that are going to be neutral, because ultimately they're going to want a piece of the action potentially. So how do you balance that? How can you control for the fact that someone might be on the committee because they want, to eventually be a partner on the project? Is there, do you look at retired folks? Do you how would the town navigate that? I think it's a good suggestion, but it came up in the chat, that sort of question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that's something that, I'm not trying to pitch DFI services directly here, but what we do with local governments, oftentimes when I think a voice from the development community would be very valuable for a downtown committee. Just a perspective that maybe you all haven't thought about yet in terms of your downtown sort of establishing your Main Street area. So, but if they're an active developer looking to, hey, I want to get a piece of this, I want to set up the partnership for myself, what DFI we do is we go out to an active and competitive solicitation process, oftentimes as sort of their end goal, to find out who could be that best partner to move forward with to realize your downtown goals after we figure out a structure for a partnership. So it's not like you can't necessarily go out and say, okay, we have handpicked our specific developer. Now I'll lean on Mac more here in terms of the legal authority for local governments to go out to specific developers. But what DFI we try to do is set up a solicitation process, more like a request for proposals, where then you're essentially making it competitive, where then developers are competing for the project rather than having one that's handpicked for it. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot of legal authority for communities to say we're essentially going to pick that developer to move forward with. I think there's got to be a competitive process if you're going to sell the property at fair market value. So I think you're kind of protected in that way, but I think setting up the framework, establishing, maybe having some developers provide a look at sort of a vision of what they would potentially want to build there is very valuable, but not necessarily beholden to that person as the ultimate developer of the product. So I think there's ways to do that, particularly around a competitive selection process.
Very small point, but at this point, one of the groups that I would make sure we had representation from on that committee would be the hospital. They're going to be a big player in the community, and we need to get them involved in a piece of this that they would care about. And the hospital will care about this.
And Mac, I want to kind of build off of that too. At the hospital, those are high paying jobs that are coming in potentially, and there's going to be, they might have a survey of their employees of what they're looking for, and what a market analysis may not capture is what that hospital is bringing to this area. So in terms of, we may see something that comes from, if you were to survey the hospital or connect with the hospital to hear what their employees are looking for, it may be that boost to get developers interested in doing a project that may have a lot of, they may feel be more risky at this point, but with the hospital's input, it may push a developer over the edge of saying, okay, we believe in this project, we believe in this public-private partnership structure because of this extra influence that the hospital has that wasn't captured in our data.
Yeah, the eds and meds, as we call them in the planning world, are a really important potential group for customers, consumers, for, especially in the hospital field. People like to live close to where they work because of their demanding schedules. And so I think there's a huge market potential. Some hospitals and healthcare facilities offer incentives to live close to their work too. So that could be another partnership to explore with the hospitals. All right, so we have a great list of suggestions. I'm going to throw them up on the screen. Michelle, you've got one more?
Well, I just wanted to say, the Atrium has just come to the community. You don't want to start out with an ask, but I know in the past they have assisted communities with building their health environment. And so thinking about a partnership for the Greenway program, how that connects into the hospital and into the downtown core, I would start now thinking about that.
Michelle, that's a great point. And I think the Carolina Thread Trail and thinking about access through your downtown and then green connectivity, people are now thinking about outdoor spaces as important as retail destinations. I think retail coffee shops have now moved essentially to outdoor greenways and outdoor parks as those destinations to be considered. I know you all have made an awesome investment in that park right across the street. And I think you got to be thinking more about that in terms of how to create spaces for people that aren't indoors and more outdoor connectivity. And so I think the hospital is they have a lot of money for health programs. So really good partnership opportunity.
All right, panel. Excellent job. There's a lot of food for thought. We're going to shift now to bring the council back into the conversation. I've got a couple of questions that came to me in the chat. So let's start with those and then open it up for folks to take themselves off mute. So wanted to return to the rezoning question. So Michelle, you mentioned looking a little bit broader beyond just the micro focus area. But there was a question in the chat about how do you rezone, we don't like to spot zone, right, to restrict development in certain areas. You have to look holistically. But Michelle, maybe as a planner, how do we pick up on the rezoning idea to prevent certain types of development in the interim? What's your thought on that?
So one thing, spot zoning is a very legal issue, but if your comprehensive plan anticipates a downtown development core, then you're consistent with your plan. And that's a key factor in making sure that you're not considered a spot zone. The other thing I would say is that uses are important, but probably not as important as the fabric of how the parcel develops. So, we heard some discussion about, well, what if there's a convenience store that goes in on the corner, which would be in any given situation of, a very possible use that would go right there at that corridor. To be thinking about, and so maybe you don't want C-stores, okay? So that may be one use you don't want, but it's more about where's that building placed on the parcel? Where's the parking? If you had a very suburban look to a new investment of a nice 2-story brick building, but it's way off of Stallings Road and it doesn't match up to your vision, that's going to create a problem. Or it's been mentioned before, mini storage. That may be another one that's just, anytime if you have something like that that goes in, that's inconsistent with where you're headed, you're basically looking at a 20 to 30-year cycle, and you don't want to wait that long. So getting I guess the core of the built environment right is the important part. Where's the building placed? Where's the parking placed? That is the key component. And then looking at a list of uses of things that you certainly don't want would be kind of my recommendation.
Michelle, how would you
So-
feel
Mhm.
an overlay district to give some definition to this area? And rather than take on the fight of downzoning specific properties, look at an overlay district. What would your response to that be?
I think that's a perfect way to do it. And that way you're not having to totally rewrite your zoning code and make changes that apply to a certain business district that now are applying somewhere else in the community, and you really maybe don't want to do all that. The overlay zone is a perfect zoning tool to use in a targeted area. So I think that would be great.
Well, let me jump in here and Lynn can answer this question. I think we've already, I thought we had an overlay district in downtown. But I could be wrong, Linda, but I know we've discussed it.
We have had them in the past. When we adopted the new zoning ordinance, we did create a town center zoning for all of the properties in the identified downtown small area plan. So we do have a specific and some specifics in there that apply to town center. That doesn't mean that we can't add additional requirements in an overlay to put on top of that TC district.
All right, thank you.
All right, so one other question from the chat that caught my attention, because I think it's a really important one, and it's a question that a lot of communities are grappling with, and there's certainly no easy answers, but this is a vision plan. It is long-term that you all have noted. How could the town build in that flexibility or adaptability to survive these changing leadership, whether it's on the council or on staff? What are some practical things that they could do to build in that resilience into this effort? And you win $1 million if you answer this question.
Yeah, I think that, and again, I kind of brought up that idea of one of the threats is this idea of the changing boards or the changing councils over time that could essentially coalesce around a vision. A board changes, a couple new members come in and say, that's not my vision. Those investments that were projected to come along with that original board, I don't support that, which could totally derail either A, if you're working with developers at that point to move forward on it. I think that's a threat that exists. And I think we've dealt with it in communities. I think it comes down to timing sometimes. DFI, when we work with communities, we think a lot about the potential timing of when we try to get developers on board. When we try to go out to solicitation to look for developers, we try to be very cognizant of when are there elections, how many are you getting elected, and sort of when might there be enough time to finalize negotiations before we have concerns over coming in and derailing a project before sort of culmination of it. So timing is something that we try to consider a lot of when thinking about going out to solicitation or trying to find the right development partner for a project. And also when we think about getting endorsements of overall partnership structures for projects also. So we try not to do that right before elections. And then oftentimes what we'll do, if it does happen that way, is get those new members caught up to speed as fast as possible with all the work that's been done, all the decisions that have been made, and say, here's what the public interests are for this project. They've been supported to date. They're in alignment with what the vision of the community is. I think there's a lot of maybe a new member may come in and just not be informed over why this is an important project. And so maybe it's a lack of information. And so we try to do as much of getting everybody caught up to speed as possible. Oftentimes it's small groups, so it's not necessarily maybe public posturing that's taking place, but more of let's have a thoughtful conversation of why this is a valuable project and why there's been so much thoughtful work put into it to date. So you can't always guarantee that it's going to be successful, but there's certain techniques that we think are kind of valuable in terms of timing, and then discussions in small groups and just getting everybody caught up to speed really quickly if the elections take place and when they do.
I think that the staff plays a key role in that. There's only so much you can do, as Eric said, but you need to have a board that understands, and this can be tricky, but when you have an election, you've got to understand that the staff plays a role of educating those that are running for election prior to the election. And that can be tricky. You know, there's always going to be elected officials that may not like that. But I think in a manager form of government, you've got to understand that that's the role staff plays. And there's going to always be changes when an election occurs. It's that old saying, elections have consequences. Yes, they do. But I think if you let your, you know, if the key issues that are going on in any town or any county, if the staff can have the flexibility of educating anyone running in that particular year on the key issues, I think that can go a long way in at least educating candidates. And I think that can play a huge role. And it, you know, I used to say as a city manager, all I could do is educate the elected officials, and then they were going to make the final decision, and I had to carry it out. That's the world we live in. But I do think that there are things staff can do to help that process.
I would also just add that is another reason to have this community group that's behind this, because a lot of times if you have a single issue candidate, sometimes that's created because of controversy that is shown up in the community. But having this, you know, citizen-led group, you know, is just another way to show that this is the vision of the community, and elected officials that are in line with the community typically do well.
Great. So those are all the questions that I have in the chat. Would love to hear from other council. Mayor, if you have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and share.
Well, I like where you were going, Geraldine, on talking about tactical issues. And one of the panelists talked about the on-street parking, and we've had several plans brought to us with the on-street parking. And I agree with the on-street parking on Old Monroe Road, but I don't think it's a good idea for a safety reason. And we have Chief Franks on here as well to have on-street parking on Stallings Road in front of the park and in front of Town Hall. You know, it's going to be very difficult to widen that road anyway, and due to the locations of the structures. But I'd like to get the panel's thought of on-street parking, specifically on Stallings Road, if they're familiar with that, you know, stretch of road.
Mayor, one of the ways that you could put a few spaces on that road and not create much of a risk is if you set back the development in that micro spot where you're looking at those 3 lots next to the town halls, set back one traffic lane for on-street parking so that there's at least the opportunity to park, 10, 12 cars there for folks to run into those shops.
Yeah, I would just chime in that I do a lot of research in terms of downtowns, and providing that on-street parking to potentially slow down traffic in your downtown would be a successful sort of tool to make people want to come in and shop. If it feels like a thoroughfare without parking for residents, and maybe you have to kind of spin around to go to a lot and it's hidden, maybe not visible, you may lose out on people that would want to come down to your downtown to shop. I think the goal shouldn't be to move people through your downtown as fast as possible. So how can you slow people down to get people to stay and linger? I think that would be a goal I would try to implement in a downtown core to get people to, you know, want to promote the businesses, want to sort of hang around as long as possible.
I'm also thinking about all the kids in the park, and you've got an ice cream store on the other side. Slowing down the traffic will be important for just the pedestrian crossings right there. In addition to, you know, the traffic that's coming through, people will have either just come off of, you know, the Monroe Expressway or Old Monroe Road, and those are just like zooming.
Yeah.
This has to be different, a different feel.
And I know you have a crosswalk from the park over to your town hall, but maybe that's where you can implement just a couple bump outs or something. If you don't feel like it's a strategy that can be supported all the way down the entire road, a few strategic bump outs to get people to slow down at strategic points where there might be significant crossings could be that. So it doesn't have to be a all intensive, the entire length of the road, but some things that could be street beautification projects that go into lighting, that go into safety, that go into marketing and promotion, that also have a health benefit, that also, you can think about these tools as not just slowing cars down, but it can serve a lot of other uses also.
All right.
Wonderful. Councilmember Richardson?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Brad Richardson. First, Alex, thank you. This is exactly the kind of panel I think that maybe we envisioned when we first talked about sort of a retreat. So it's very interesting, and thank you. It is the right panel. A couple comments and then a question or two. Things I wrote down that were important to me. And I think Michelle started it off with saying that the vibe, at first that felt a little touchy-feely, and I get it. I understand what you meant by that, but you combined it with people versus promotion, and the people part is going to take me to my question in just a moment, but I wanted to meet that there. So thank you. That was a very good comment. People and promotion equal this vibe. I appreciate you talking about the politics of it. I mean, literally and honestly, I appreciate the fact that what this will take. And John, you and I talked about this before I popped on council. We had a meeting at the Small Bar, one of the few restaurants in what might be downtown. And you said, this is going to take a long time. And I said, you're right. You probably thought it would take longer than I did, and you're probably right. But this takes commitment of a board that I'm not sure we've had in a while. We've got elections every 2 years, and I just appreciate the honesty of what you just said, particularly you, Eric, about you have to be cognizant of timing. It's an inherently practical issue that if you bring a project through and people get upset, those council members who voted for it, if they're up, they're gone. We've seen that locally in our community as well. Thank you for that honest discussion. The downtown booster group is a great idea. We should move on that post haste. I would also, we haven't talked about the role of elected officials, but I would say the mayor, Wyatt, your role in this is maybe more important than you think. In this form of government, I get that the staff runs the business of the town and the mayor has a vote in a tie-breaking session, but I worked in a government for a while that the mayor used his influence, his tie-breaking vote, his appointment to committees very deliberately. And I think, Wyatt, you do a great job of this too. You wield a lot of influence in this town. And if Wyatt's not on board, excuse me, let me back up. If the mayor is not on board with this, I think we lose a great opportunity. So I would just applaud Wyatt for his vision about the downtown and support of it thus far. But if we lose that, I think we're in trouble.
Checks in the mail.
My question relates to well, the last comment, and I'll stop making comments and ask one question. It is budget. I'd like the final point of, I think maybe Michelle, you made this too. You need to create and communicate this vision, this plan for downtown, and be very transparent about the cost and the benefits, of course. I love that. In fact, one thing we haven't done, we spent some time talking to some property owners, but we haven't really painted the economic picture of why you would do this and be very upfront that this is a very, very expensive thing to do. You frankly buying that John Deere parcel, which is a great idea, is a very expensive idea. But I think that's helpful, and I think we should move on that. My question is about geography. Someone mentioned that we're a very linear town from the north to the south. I live on the south. John, you live up on the upper north. Our downtown, I don't think of it as much as a Stallings downtown, but as a central place for our area that includes Matthews and Indian Trail primarily. So when you talk about surveying interest, getting input about services and what you'd like, I wanted to make the comment that Indian Trail citizens are the users of this downtown, perhaps more than many folks in Stallings. And then the last thing is multifamily. It is the elephant in the room. In fact, some of our council members, for very good reasons, sort of are one issue sort of campaigners on it. They, Heather, you've said the other night, multifamily is where you vote. You feel obligated to vote no on multifamily. But if I'm hearing you correctly, panel, the one thing that we need in our downtown is multifamily. You didn't use that word, I don't think. You said housing, but you said multifamily by implication around our park, in those vacant lands that Ms. Funderburk owns. And that is what you're asking us to do. I agree. That's a lightning rod in our community. So I'd like some conversation about how to communicate that and get support for that.
One thing to think, I'll jump in. I know this is controversial, but it's about people. You might want to think about, some 55 and older, not that needs to be the whole residential, but what about some senior housing? Folks that have, 55 is not old, right? Y'all agree with that, correct?
Absolutely. Getting
Yeah.
younger.
Yeah, I mean, that's like 55 is like the new 35, is what I heard. But, you have people with maybe some disposable income. They have a lot of time. They've maybe have moved here because they have kids or grandkids, they're still working and they wanted to be close. That might be an interesting concept to have some, senior housing close by. Just a thought.
I can kind of chime in on the what I meant by residential as the opportunity. What I'm seeing from the development community is it's hard to get projects financed because of the development costs that are associated with them for small scale residential projects. Operating expenses are high, the development costs are high, so there takes a certain number of units, of residential units, in order to make a project financially feasible, to get a project financed. And so we're running into this sort of, what is that minimum number that when we talk to all the developers that are doing projects, for what it takes to make sense financially in terms of, the management fees associated with overseeing a development project. Right now, I don't know if condos would be a thing that could be supported in your downtown in terms of condos because of the costs associated with doing, condos in your downtown core. So in terms of capturing the opportunity, and this would all have to go to a market analysis. I think Michelle nailed it, is what is the projections for your community also? Are you seeing a lot of the sort of silver tsunami that we're seeing all across North Carolina and other communities in terms of an aging population that would, also demand some of the downtown amenities like walking trails, parks, open space, recreation, restaurants to walk to? Or, what is that segment of the population that's projected to grow in this area? And I think that's where it becomes a decision for you all to make. Do you want to, if multifamily is just a no-go topic, okay, you have to get creative about what then is that mix of product type that could be supporting your downtown. Now, I'm coming from a perspective of what a developer would look for. Developers right now are looking for those multifamily projects because that's what banks are financing right now. I think there's a lot of risk in office, there's a lot of risk in retail, and they would only want to go those retail and office components if they knew that there was a residential component to go along with it to support it. So it's hard. I think that's one of the challenges with thinking about building a downtown from scratch, is what is that right mix, and how do you get phase one, which is the riskiest phase of your town center, off the board so that you can see it mature over time to then realize maybe the more sort of, smaller scale development opportunities. And not saying smaller scale, I mean just maybe sort of smaller scale boutique retail sort of destination type products. So it's hard to, it's a balance. And I think right now what we're seeing from the lending world is the multifamily is sort of commanding the opportunities right now in the market.
I think the other thing that I would just contribute to this discussion is that there's a difference between being a shaper of development, which to Eric's earlier point, when we started the discussion, you all own real estate. So you're in a different situation. You could partner with a developer and have more control over the development product and, signal to the market what you want in your community. That's a very different position than in other towns that are just on the receiving end of development proposals, and their only tools in the toolkit are zoning, and if they have to go through some sort of entitlement process to change certain components of the zoning. So you all are in a strong position. So I think, to Michelle's point, you might want to spend some time thinking about defining multifamily for Stallings. Is that the 55 and over? Is it, combined live-work units? Those have been very successful in communities. We know work from home is going to continue to be a trend. There are developers out there that build ground floor kind of work artist, some of it's artist type housing where you've got makers on the first floor who live above. So there's all different types of product out there in the multifamily umbrella. It just might take some hard thinking on your part to define what that is and then communicate and engage your community so that it kind of makes it less stigmatized or scary or even potentially appealing to your residents. Mac, Jeff, anything you want to contribute to the multifamily conversation?
Just very quickly, I think the opportunity for a maybe 2-story, at most 3-story project in that micro focus area. So you've got street level retail and living units above it would work, but it needs to be limited. If you start getting something of the scale of a 4-story building, I think you've changed the vision of what this downtown is. But if you were to look at the Deer property or the property just across Stallings Road from that underdeveloped large tract over there, and looked at that as either a senior living project or any kind of appropriately designed multifamily project where you're right next door to a beautiful park, walking distance to it, and you're right across the street from some convenience retail things, a barbershop, a drugstore, a donut store, a Starbucks, the things that people want to walk to. I think that mix works really well.
And I think when I walked around and asked people about this when I was campaigning, I think that people were concerned about large scale apartment complexes and it looking like large scale apartment complexes versus what at least what I think of when I think of a downtown, I think of it a very diverse looking area, retail. We've talked about destination spots. I think when you start getting into large scale 6, 7, 8 building type apartment complexes, it starts to dominate the landscape and kind of doesn't feel like a mixed use anymore. It feels like apartment complex and a few other things kind of mentality. And I do have a couple of questions when we get to that point.
Go ahead, council member.
Yeah, yes. So again, my name's Steve Ayers, on the council, and Matt, you said something very early on about the downtown is a reflection of your town. I guess I wouldn't mind you spending maybe a couple of sentences on maybe the difference between the downtown being a reflection of the town versus leading the direction of the town. In other words, it being not necessarily reflecting what the town is today, but also kind of leading where the town may go tomorrow.
Mr. Ayers, you're exactly on the right point, and that is you've got a blank canvas. you get to decide which way you want it to go and what you want it to look like and what you want the character of it to be. And my sense is that you want a comfortable small town feel that's very walkable, that's approachable by people, that's comfortable to be right across the street from this beautiful park you've built. That's a vision that matches the core area you're trying to build. You wouldn't put the downtown area of Asheville into the middle of Wilson or Rocky Mount. It just wouldn't fit. You would look at it and say, this doesn't fit. What y'all are talking about is a downtown core that fits for Stallings and would be that placemaking event for you. So the fact that you've got a blank slate is just perfect for this. You can decide what it's going to look like. And I'm hoping that you will push this vision and lead this vision to create a larger core than just that 3-lot area, because I think you've got the opportunity to do it.
And I might just say one thing about that, Steve, that just kind of reflects maybe that question that you had of current residents versus future projection for what your town may be in the future. I'm dealing with that in a community right now where to get buy-in for the investments that are needed that you need to make in your downtown to support a first phase, you need to reflect what your community would like to see happen in your downtown, but also project forward for what your future town should be. So it is that balance between matching what your community would like now versus what it might be in the future also, in order to get buy-in for those investments.
Okay. And Eric, my second question was actually to you in general. I mean, obviously we can talk and debate this 26,000 times. I mean, you've done this before. I mean, just your gut feel, do you feel like this is, based on what you've seen, we should move this forward regardless? I mean, does it feel like it's at least feasible from what you see?
Yeah, my take, I mean, we've done a ton of market analyses in these Charlotte metro areas. We worked in communities all around here. We're working in Kannapolis right now, the city of Kannapolis and their downtown revitalization project, Pineville, other communities in this sort of Charlotte metro area where we know the growth is happening. And so it becomes, the opportunity is there. So I would say, if it's a vision that you all support, yes, move it forward. And I think the key questions though are acquiring the right property and acquiring enough property to make the vision a reality. My concern would be, if you don't have that large enough sort of vision, trying to attract a developer, which then doesn't maybe have that full vision, that there's a lot of risk if it's, okay, we can do phase one, which is a one development block, but there's no control over these future phases, and it can then spiral out of control and not have that be a reality. So then I just develop one block and that's it for my downtown. And so to get developers interested in doing this project, having that site control over having the ability to do phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 is something that could attract a larger development pool interest in this kind of project. So I would say, yes, I think the opportunity is there. I haven't done a market analysis. I don't know what your growth projections are, but I would assume with the access, with the Charlotte access and this whole region of the growth that you all have been experiencing, I would say, yeah, the opportunity is there.
Okay. And that's kind of what I was looking for, just kind of gut feeling. I know another town is going through a similar type scenario where they don't have as much traffic as us, and they're actually doing a deep dive feasibility on whether or not it's even, and I just want to get your gut on that. Thanks.
And
Eric, is that something you could help us with?
What's that?
As far as, we've got this vision here. Mac mentioned this before. We've got this vision here. Is it marketable to the market today, right? Like, we could sit around and talk about that, but it sounds like we probably need to do more of a deep dive into kind of understanding, hey, is our vision, is it marketable before we do all this work and don't get any interest from developers? Or what do we need to change in order to, is that something that DFI could help us with?
Yeah, and that's what our process is a pre-development process, assessing the development opportunity, but first and foremost, putting the public's interest at the heart of it. To essentially say, here's what the public wants to achieve. Now let's take it from a private development perspective to say, is this market ready? If it's not market ready, how can we make it there through public-private partnerships? So that's what we do. And we layer in market analysis to understand, all right, how much could you capture in terms of opportunity? What's a reality in terms of rents that you could achieve? And is this project financially feasible from a private development perspective? And if you all could agree on, hey, we like this partnership structure, go to solicitation and then see what developers come back with responses and see if there's one that aligns with what you feel is a comfortable partnership structure.
So I'm just going to pause our conversation because we are at the time that Alex allowed for this panel and conversation. I just want to summarize just a few key points to wind us down. So I think what I heard from the panel when we did the SWOT analysis was that the vision is good, the core components are there, there are lots of opportunity, and maybe I can get a thumbs up emoji from my panel on your support with that the town should move forward with this action plan. Am I speaking for everyone correctly? Thumbs up, this is a good plan. Awesome. Now, that being said, there are opportunities to do more and other things as you start to move into implementation. So what you're seeing on the screen here are the recommendations from the panel of other things to consider, extending the zoning regulations beyond the micro area, looking at an overlay zone to the micro area itself, thinking about this citizen business booster club champions group, doing some community education about the vision and talking about what are the benefits, why are you doing it, that it will take time and it will be resource intensive. A lot of discussion around getting site control or helping to shape some of those parcels that are on the market. Looking at a market feasibility scan and kind of bringing in that financial viability, as we talked just now with Eric about. And then lastly, an opportunity to engage the hospital a little bit more explicitly in the vision and some other investments in the downtown. So really great work, panel. This is awesome. I hope I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for your time and energy, and want to turn it over to Alex.
Alex, I want to make one more comment that we didn't talk about, and somebody, if you'd allow me, somebody mentioned it about the super street. You know, Old Monroe Road was on the priority list to be widened in 2000, probably 10 to, it started, you know, probably at least 10, 12 years ago. And that's when Stallings started looking at our downtown redevelopment. And then, you know, so we've been looking at this a long time, but the problem is it's been delayed. It was slated to be started construction in 2017. Politics took over. So now here it is 2021, and who knows when it's going to be built. And then that's why developers haven't come to us, in my opinion, and the ones I've talked to, there's the uncertainty on what that road's going to look like. Why would they invest in it when they don't know what the infrastructure is going to look like? So that's been one of the obstacles to us developing this. But we, you know, Stallings has been looking at this downtown for 10 to 12 years on what it, you know, we went over to Mint Hill and looked at what they were doing, and, you know, so that needs to be considered, you know, what Old Monroe Road is going to look like, what the developers think about a super street and how it's going to affect the viability of a project.
Great comments, Wyatt. Thank you. All right. Well, I guess y'all we're at a point for a break. So is everybody comfortable with perhaps having a 5-minute break right now? We'll get into the priority.
Yep. Sounds good. What time back?
All right, let's see. It's 10:33.
10:40?
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great job, panelists and Geraldine. 10 out of 10.
Oh, is the panel going to be with us when we come back?
I don't think they were planning on it.
Well, let me just reiterate what Brad said. Alex, thank you for bringing together such a distinguished and panel. And Geraldine, thank you for leading it. And we just can't thank y'all enough for taking time out of your Saturday to bring your expertise to our town.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you all for having us here.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, y'all. Looks like it's 10:40. So I think that was the time we set back. So is everybody ready to get started? All right. Mayor, are you good?
Going to be.
Good. Mayor, are you good with getting started, sir? Wyatt, can you hear me? Oh, it looks like we're still waiting on Linda too. So let's give it, I apologize, y'all. Let's give it another minute, please. All right, here we go. All right. Everybody ready to get started again?
Ready?
Okay, great. Thank you. I thought that was a really productive discussion. Just in recapping, heard a lot of great ideas, a lot of great changes, potentially tweaks to make. Mayor and council, with your permission, what I might suggest is let me take the feedback we got. I heard the questions. I think I heard some key issues that can maybe lead us to potentially tweak some aspects of our plan. So what I might suggest is let me kind of identify that, work through the notes, come up with some perhaps some tweaks to our action plan, and bring it back to the council in the very near future, probably that second meeting in March. Would that be acceptable?
Sounds good to me.
All right, great, thank you. Now, obviously we're transitioning. That was the top scoring statistically priority, creating a downtown when we focused on it. But we still got 6 other rough priorities that we wanted to bring y'all up to speed, show you the progress that we're making. Even though these are multi-year priorities in some case, define what success is in the short term, and then talk about barriers to success. So the first one we suggested to have up was part of the downtown efforts, which is the farmers market. So I wanted to turn it over to Ms. Platts. Ashley, can you lead us off on this one?
Sure. Are we going to have slides? Oh, yeah, perfect. Thanks, Aaron.
Perfect.
Always on top of it.
And what I'll say is we designed these to be short just because of time. And once we get to the suggested measure of success, what we're going to do, what I would suggest to do is use the chat feature. And when we get there, I'll lead it to you and we can see if there's consensus or not, or if further discussion is needed. And that way we're just trying to move efficiently. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I will have to say that that session this morning has definitely got my brain going in all kinds of ways about this farmers market and the downtown potential. So yeah, I'm glad to carry that energy forward. And council, this was actually a council suggestion that we look at ways to leverage the park downtown in order to help meet the vision that the town is trying to bring forward for downtown, and to leverage some of the events and activities that have already been successful in the past. Just real quick, we're working on, what post-COVID looks like for our event. So you will be getting an update from us on that, and this will definitely be part of it. So Aaron, if you want to switch to the next slide. We've been working through this plan. It's on our balanced scorecard for this year, and those benchmarks were to have a market plan ready by the end of March and be able to stand up the market by the end of June. We are on track with that right now. What we've been doing is exploring a partnership with Union County's farmers market. The county has actually hired a full-time market coordinator. And so that person spends all their time setting up different satellite locations, as well as procuring the vendors, taking all of the liability and insurance difficult portions, and takes care of them for the satellite locations. We've been doing research on other local markets. There's one in Mint Hill, Matthews, Pineville, Indian Trail, Monroe. We even have a little a stand-up one on Old Monroe Road occasionally by the rock store. So through that process, what we've done is kind of put together some best practices with information from local, state, and other national park and rec departments. There's a Facebook group called Women in Parks and Recreation that Eunice has been very active in, getting other people's plans to see how they're executed, what they do with logistics, and how did they grow from, hey, we're starting this from scratch, and then we are bringing it into what will eventually be a staple downtown regular event. And during that, we did come across a few barriers. Obviously, logistics right now are kind of an issue in the park, specifically looking at electricity where we have it available, and not necessarily having that portion of the park where I think we kind of envisioned the farmers market eventually going. It's not quite developed yet in order to meet those goals. So what we're doing is looking at an interim solution that will utilize Stallings Park with the logistics there to kind of get us off the ground running through this summer. And then once we get a better idea of what we need as far as infrastructure goes, then we'll be putting together a plan to expand out into that park area. One of the opportunities here is Stallings Park is actually a LWCF granted site, which is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And the LWCF was renewed at the congressional level, but they're only giving out funding to already established LWCF sites now, or to acquire new property. So we will have a potential in the future to leverage some of those resources to help us grow this market, which I'm actually decided, I kind of think I just want to call it downtown market instead of farmers market. That way, we're spearheading that downtown effort, and we can bring in some of those other ideas that I heard on the call this morning. So yeah, we've got a few barriers. The area is saturated with markets, but that's not something that our Parks Department has ever taken as too much of a challenge, because we will take it, make it creative, make it unique for Stallings, and get it up and running this summer. And I think that's my update here. So as everybody's cool with us exploring this partnership with Union County, we'll have that market plan to you by 3/31 and plan to stand up that market by June 30th.
Yeah, actually, that does sound like a good idea, because that fourth bullet on the barriers where you said sufficient suppliers to meet the market needs, that was in vendor availability and their willingness. When I talked to my wife's cousin who ran the Raleigh Farmers Market forever, that's the one thing he told me was that it's critical to have dependable suppliers. So I would assume partnering up with Union County, they have their suppliers already set up, and that would help us with our supply situation. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And they actually would provide the tents, tables, and chairs, and bring all of that equipment out. Our staff would assist setting it up, but they bring all the materials as well as the vendors for you. So I think to get started, it's a good opportunity for us. It'll give us a chance to learn, how the markets work, and then customize it for what we need in our town.
And then they would bring their suppliers over to us.
Correct.
Well. Yeah, great.
Hey, Ashley, that on the barriers, the area saturated with existing or established markets, have we thought about maybe, making this a little bit more of a niche to the community? Instead of just a farmer's market, have a, farmers and artists market?
Yes, that's actually within our plan. Eunice and I have been working on some very interesting ideas for that we hope to bring to you as soon as we get our agreement with Union County finalized, along with a schedule of what we're looking at to get us started for this year. So she's just got a ton of creative ideas. And then hearing the things you guys were talking about this morning, like pop-up food trucks, and I think it's got a lot of opportunity here.
Thank you.
So actually, the Union County farmers, they would only provide tables, tents, things like that. They're specifically for the farmers market side of the event, right?
Correct. And we would, if we do anything else, we have materials that we use for our events as well. Like for Stallings Fest. So we have that opportunity.
Okay.
So what?
Actually, this is Brad. Thanks, good work, and I appreciate how hard it's been to start this up in a pandemic. But I think the plan looks good. My question is this a partnership with Union County that's been tried before in other places? Do they have these agreements with other parts of the county, or is this sort of a new thing?
It's a little of both. They do have satellite markets that are already established, but it would be new for our area. Both us and Indian Trail are looking to start satellite agreements. And part of what that leverage does for us is we get to utilize their resources and their marketing capabilities. They make their own signs, they make their own banners. They have a pretty good outreach through Facebook and social media, and everything would be advertised on the, through the Ag Center as well. So it gives us a little more reach partnering with them. And I think it's a good opportunity for us, at least to get started and kind of, get that off the ground. Once it's established, then it may need to be tweaked, for us, and we may be able to take it over. But I think they've had a great success, at least the groups that we've talked to that have done satellite locations.
Ashley, are all farmers markets on Saturday mornings?
No, actually, Union County has farmers markets throughout the week as well. There are quite a few scheduled for Saturday mornings in our immediate area. So that might be a barrier for us to start. We may not, haven't really worked through all the logistics on that yet, but we are considering all our options for both weekdays and weekends to see, at least to get us to start what will be the best for our area, and working with the county so they don't spread their resources too thin. Everybody goes to the farmer's market, and eventually you run out of vendors that are available for the same day and time. So we're working through those details now.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. This first one, what I might suggest, I want to make sure we're being efficient with time, and also everybody's being heard, especially virtually. It may be that much harder to give everybody the opportunity to kind of jump in here. So one thing I wanted to try is to use the chat feature, and I'm just sending. All right, so I've just sent a chat to everybody, and so the suggested benchmark we have success for this priority is having a stand-up market started by 6/30/21. And if everybody's okay with that, I would just ask that you write endorse into the chat. Okay. And just for the record, I'm going to make sure I'm reading here. So I've got the mayor, Brad, Heather, and David all endorsing. Stephen endorsing as well.
Yeah, I know that you like the chat feature. It's a little disjointed, just to be honest with you, because we're going from video to the chat and back and forth. So just kind of be aware of that it's a little disjointed, at least for
sure. Well, that's good feedback.
Especially if you're not using a multi-monitor setup.
Yeah.
That's good feedback. Maybe it wasn't a good idea. Let's
There's only 6 of us.
the next one and just see it.
Yeah. If it works good for everybody else, then don't change it. I was just kind of giving you a little bit of feedback from my side.
Perfect.
I just noticed it made Steve get up out of his chair to do something. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Well, great, y'all. Excited to see this market and what everybody can do. And I know our heads are all flush with ideas after having that expert panel. So that's great. Great job.
Can I just ask a question about the timing? And I know that there's a lot of work to be done for this, but is it at all possible that could be a stand-up before June 30th? Because that way we're kind of missing the peak strawberry season and things that bring people out to farmers markets. Would it be possible to have it up and running before then?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We tied that in with our balanced scorecard goal. So that's why that date, it was 6:30 when we originally set the balanced scorecard goal. Remember, it's been almost a year ago. But we're definitely making progress toward an earlier opening. And what I'll do is once we get the plan finalized, it will come with a startup date, and I'll bring that to you for review. That way, we can say, hey, we're going to start in May or maybe even late April. Well, I think it's definitely feasible, especially partnering with the county, because that takes a lot of the pre-work off of our hands. We don't have to go out and find and drum up vendors, to make this possible.
Right. Ashley, does that limit us from bringing in vendors though? Is that agreement in your mind going to say that we can only have farmers or vendors that sell produce specifically coming from Union County?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else on that priority, let's keep moving. Great job, Ms. Platts and everyone else.
Thank you, Ashley.
All right. Next up, we got Ms. Hare with land use.
Good morning. The Planning and Zoning Department focused on priority number 2 of the council's priorities from last year, specifically dealing with the review and amending the land use plans to better align with the council's vision. The strategy that was specifically adopted by the council is they were seeking for Attorney Matt McCarley to work with the council in small groups that were organized by the mayor to review and identify the remaining issues with our land use plans. Mr. McCarley was tasked with creating a plan of action that would address issues that were raised by these small groups and then bring those issues to full council for consideration. And staff assisted Mr. McCarley as needed on this. So there was a strategy execution that was specific to this project. In June, after the mayor appointed small committees, we began meeting to review the Monroe Bypass Small Area Plan as well as the Idlewild Road Small Area Plan. We did both of those in June. From that, a lot of ideas came from those meetings. And on July 13th, all of the recommendations that came from those subcommittees were presented to council as a whole. Many of those, or the majority of those changes, had to do with amendments to our development ordinances in the form of text changes. So on July 13th, the council unanimously agreed for staff to begin working on those text amendments and bring those back to council for approval. Staff did. We took those to planning board in July, and then on August 24th, the council adopted those amendments, and they were integrated into our current development ordinance. This is just a list just to remind everybody of what the amendments that we made were. Specifically, we discussed the development ordinance, removing language in that ordinance that really tied the development ordinance to our small area plans. We were using those small area plans to lead development rather than guide it. So we took that language out. We also changed the development agreement requirement to apply only to larger projects on the advice of our attorney, Matt McCarley. We also created a process for the comp plan and the small area plan to be amended when we did conditional zonings so that our development ordinance and our small area plans would continue to be effective. There's also some language that was adopted by the state with the 160D requirements that address this as well. One of the main things we did was we reviewed our table of uses, specifically the uses that we were allowing by right in the MU1 and MU2 districts, Townhomes are one of the things that council had a concern with and wanted to be able to review those projects and have some more control over where those went in town. So we made those conditional zoning on that table of uses. One other thing that we did is we created a policy that requires subcommittee review, part of the conditional zoning process. The small committees that met to review the small area plans really felt like the subcommittee process had been beneficial in allowing them to review developments before it actually got to a public hearing, and having that opportunity to sit down with the developer and walk through their plans was helpful. So we made that part of our conditional zoning process. And then finally, we actually made a change to the Idlewild small area plan where we reflected single family and put in a 100-foot buffer where adjacent to the Shannamara neighborhood. So going forward, in terms of planning and zoning, in terms of our plans, benchmark measures for 21-22 success, we talked a bit about this in the panel discussion earlier, was creating an overlay for our downtown area. Once the downtown action plan is adopted by council, staff would coordinate with our legal counsel on the creation of an overlay that would promote and direct development of the identified downtown core. And we would look at having a draft to present to council within 12 months. One thing that came out of that discussion this morning, and again, I just want to reiterate that I think it was very useful and helpful, very interesting. But we have tried, as the mayor stated, we've done overlays before for the downtown area. And while we can't zone a downtown into existence because it is very market driven, we can use these tools to prevent uses from coming into the downtown area and developing on property that we really want to preserve for when the market is there for the development that we would like to see in our downtown core. So I think this is a very important tool that we can be utilizing. And then another issue that came up this year was open space. We spent a lot of time discussing the need to make sure that we are requiring adequate open space within our developments, ensuring that the right type of open space is being provided. We have already started this project. I think a measure of success would be the completion and adoption of that new open space ordinance. We are looking at this point, we are on target with our consultant, Centralina, to have a draft to council, before council to review, hopefully by April. So in the next month or two, you should be seeing a draft on that open space language.
What's the timing bullet, if you don't mind, Lynn?
I'm sorry, Mr. Ayers,
what's the end time? When does that 12 months end?
Well, that would just be whenever the council adopts that action plan. We would begin working on that. So whenever that happens, we would hopefully have something to you within a year of that time frame. So if you all were to adopt that in the next month or so, we would begin working on it and hopefully have it something to you within the 12-month period.
Okay, I guess that would just be put a pin in that, I guess. I just like to know when we think that we would be looking at that action plan for adoption.
Mr. Alex, you might be able to answer that.
Sure.
Is that something that
Sure, thanks, Lynn. So I think my thinking would be, Stephen, is to kind of synthesize the conversation that we heard today, try to take out the gold nuggets and tweak our action plan and bringing it back to the council, likely that second meeting in March for the board's consideration. So that'd be kind of my thinking. You know, one of the things I heard from a couple of our experts, Eric and Mac, during the expert panel, and they termed it site control, right? And you could have site control either through acquiring the property or through zoning. And it sounded like that was a pretty time expediency need.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was picking up on.
And so I wonder, you know, my concern, staff internally, that 12-month time frame, it's really a workload thing as much as anything else. I know our planning staff are working on a 160D rewrite, all the various, you know, development agreements and projects that are through the pipeline. And so I think that's where the kind of 12-month time frame was going through. So on one hand, I see kind of a need for expediency there and getting that done. And on the other hand, I see a staff workload that's significant and might not be conducive to doing that as soon as possible. So I think it's probably something worthy of more discussion. Is there a way we can free up more time for Lynn to work on this, or are there other options? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Lynn, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Councilmember Ayers, that there is a need for this sooner than later. Just speaking from, the phone calls I get on a daily basis from developers, from real estate agents showing people property. There's a lot of people looking at that John Deere site, and there are probably some of the uses that are looking to go, and there are things that we would not consider to be a positive for our downtown. So I do think putting something in place, even if it's just a stopgap measure until we can get that overlay written, like there might even be a possibility of, let's look at the use table again. Are there things on there we want to, just making sure that we've taken everything out of that TC district that we feel like really would not benefit our goals and vision for the downtown. So those are something we could do maybe more quickly than creating an entire overlay district. But I would agree with Alex that, creating something like that does take time, and that it would be something that would either need to be prioritized by the department and some other things get pushed to the side. But yes, I agree that it is important. It's just a timing barrier.
Let me ask this
question. Yep.
If I could just inject one point, should we consider going back and look at acquiring that property? It would be a huge investment monetarily. However, that parcel, one, it gives us more flexibility over what develops on it, and two, even if we decide not to, move forward with a particular option there, it also would be an investment for the town financially, because that property is just going to do nothing but go up in value, especially after Old Monroe is built.
This is Brad.
We
if I
talked
may.
about that before. We talked about the fact that there are other ways to control without purchasing a lot of property. So I guess because of the expense of that one, I would definitely want to explore the other options first. But as I'm looking at this now, I'm trying to remember, I don't know when I've seen the downtown action plan, and I think I'm kind of mixing in my own mind the economic development plan and the downtown action plan. When have we last seen that? Has it been within last few months? I need to have a refresher on what kind of plan we currently have.
Okay. Would the council like to revisit that now? That'd be helpful, and then come back to this.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Well, and Alex, let me just go ahead. I think Mac is still at least on the call. So I'll prep him for a question to answer maybe after you're done. When we were doing the downtown SAP review in small committee, sort of subcommittees, I forget who was in the room. Mac was there doing all of these, and there was a sense that we were thinking about purchasing land. And Mac is, I left the room that day thinking land banking as a strategy was not a wise use of funds. I may have oversimplified that statement there. Today, there felt to be more of an urgency. Mac was more of an advocate for locking up land, controlling land as a panelist, and that might be the difference, panelist in getting the downtown done. So maybe a comment from Mac would be helpful at the end of your review, Alex, this plan.
Okay, great. Aaron, can I have control real quick, please? And I want to run through this too. I don't think we'll solve all the issues with this tonight, so I want to be cognizant of time to keep moving, but let me kind of pull this up here. All right. So can everybody see the recommended next steps, two-prong approach? I think we last talked about this, I want to say in January. And these came out of two things. The vast majority of these are the downtown committee's recommendations. And then we tweaked it a little bit based on conversations with the property owners. So on one hand, we want to prevent development that conflicts with the downtown vision, right? You heard that a lot. We want to stop the things that we don't want, because something can plop down there and it'll be there for the next 30 years. It could change the dynamic of what we're trying to create. And a lot of that goes back to creating an overlay district that can help prevent and restrict and require the things that we want to see. And then the second aspect of it, the second prong, is proactively investing to create a downtown catalyst. Because right now,
Alex, I'm sorry to interrupt you. On
Sure.
my screen, I'm seeing something that's not lining up with what you're talking about. I see in the background document, but something in the foreground. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be seeing that.
Oh, thank you, Brad. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me try this again.
Yeah, was that everybody or just me?
Yeah.
There you
No.
go.
All right, let's go. There we go. Can y'all?
Better. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for calling me out, Brad. That's helpful. Would have gone forever. So two-prong approach. The first thing, we want to restrict the things from coming in that we don't want, because something can come in, whether it's, I don't know, something, I don't even make up, something that will be there for the next 30, 50 years or whatever, and then it changes the dynamic of downtown. So a lot of that is preventing the things and establishing the rules and regulations. And so a lot of that, we would unleash Lynn and Mac to go through our ordinances and see, all right, do we need to change anything to restrict the things that don't line up with our vision in our core area and create an overlay district? So that's the first prong, restrict the things that we don't want. The second prong is proactively invest to create a downtown catalyst, because there's not a downtown here, right? The free market isn't doing it by itself. So it's a matter of us taking affirmative action to try to create that downtown catalyst and core here. So the two things we had identified was building out the initial streetscape portion. And then the second thing was to continue the downtown alignment by either making strategic property purchases or trying to assemble parcels, working with property owners, and then ultimately considering doing some sort of public-private partnership to get that first catalyst of what we want into downtown. So those are the two major prongs of what the action plan is, and some of the prongs. So it strives to be both visionary and practical at the same time.
That helps. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking. All right. And can you bring that slide back up that Lynn was on, Ms. Nichols, please? Just talking out loud, I wonder if there's, I get the sense that from the board that everybody's in favor of doing some sort of overlay district, right? It's the timing of it. That's the issue. Is that fair? Is that a fair?
Alex, just help me. I always am confused, and I probably should be least confused because I've worked in government before, but I'd like to know exactly what an overlay district is and what authority and power it conveys,
right,
and restrictions on the landowners.
Lynn, could you explain to us?
I'm sure. Basically what an overlay district is, it's a set of zoning standards that you apply to properties within a certain area. There's an underlying zoning, like the property may be zoned town center, it might be zoned mixed use. So the rules and regulations of that underlying zoning are still in effect. That's typically where some of the uses may be established. But with an overlay, you can go in and add additional requirements that only apply to those properties. So it might have to do with your setbacks, where your parking's located, the type of landscaping you want to see, or if there's any specifics that you want to use to create a certain feel in an area. An overlay district can do those things. And with an overlay, you adopt it, it becomes part of your ordinance. You show it on the zoning map as an overlay. So, people when they're looking at the map will understand that, yes, there's some specific requirements that are additional to the underlying zoning in this area. Once you've created that overlay, you can apply it anywhere in town. So if it's something we feel like works really well for our downtown area, and, say something starts to pop up in a different area of town, you have that language. But we would anticipate in the situation that we would create something that was, to be used specifically to help create the uses in that downtown core to give you that real downtown feel.
Question here. How is this different from the downtown small area plan?
Overlay has more specifics. It has rules in it, similar to a development ordinance, where a small area plan is really just a visual. It gives you a vision for how you want things to look. It may show road connectivity. It might show where you want certain uses to be in certain areas. But
so is it essentially the written version of the picture of the small area plan?
It could be. We could use that small area plan as a guide for, yes, we want things to look this way, but you have to have that set of rules in a development ordinance to actually not just guide development, but it's what you use to create development. A small area plan is used to guide it, and a comp plan guides it, but your ordinances are what give you the rules for what actually can be built and how it can be built.
Where do we use the small area plan for the downtown now?
I think it's
What's
still
the purpose of it now?
I think it's still used as a guide, and I think it's still a big part of what Alex is working on in creating this action plan. I think that what he's done very wisely is he's looked at that overall small area plan and broken it down into smaller chunks just to focus on different areas. But I think what he's doing is a lot of what we created through that small area plan. He's just putting action to it.
I wonder, just thinking out loud, because it's going to take time probably to really fully and thoroughly think out the overlay district. If there's a way to kind of, as Ms. Hare suggested, I think very wisely, there's a way initially to do something that might be create a shell of an overlay district, do it quicker, and maybe really run through those, or at least run through the tables of uses in the coming months, and just double check that for our town center area, and just make sure there's not anything in there that would be particularly troublesome. Or, potentially contract out some of that work. There may be some ways that we can get something done quicker, or at least address some of the concerns here. So perhaps, staff need to get back and think about timing for this, and kind of come back and talk to the board about it a little bit in the future.
And just to kind of also, I think putting this overlay together, we don't want to rush something. I would hate for us to get together in 6 weeks and, us have to constantly go back and making changes. But I do think taking a look at the use table, just based on the calls I'm getting, the inquiries I'm getting about the John Deere property, as well as we've got a lot of big vacant tracts there at the corner of Old Monroe and Stallings Road. And I agree with the mayor. I think some of the road improvements are stalling some things, but once they make those decisions and that project starts, I think things will begin to change, similar like they did similar to the bypass. So I think it's very important that we look at that use table and make sure that we're protecting ourselves there.
I think that the balance here is that if it takes too long, we're going to potentially miss the opportunity of the reason why we're even creating it. So I think that's the concern from my point of view.
One final comment from me. Linda asked the right question, and there's a big junk when you consider spending money on a piece of land adjacent to town hall. It makes sense, but it's very expensive. I'd like to know what it would cost us to purchase a right of first refusal or a warrant or something on the land around town hall, and if that's worth considering for as part of this as well. So don't have to have that answer today, but we felt like in Linda's comment, there were other ways to control beyond zoning and outright purchase. And again, I don't know the answer to that. I still, and Matt, I've asked Mac maybe a question on sort of his land banking as a strategy.
Mr. Richardson, I think the answer to that is if you believe that a larger project is what's going to be required to make the downtown vision work, controlling the John Deere property would give you a better shot at getting a project of a size that would attract more developers.
Thank you.
So just thinking about the benchmark of success here. So we would, and Mac, before we go on, do you have any thoughts about the best way to approach this from a time expediency standpoint?
I slightly disagree with Lynn. I think the quicker we look at an overlay to prevent some of the most obnoxious uses in that downtown core area, the better. If we miss a few, we can add them later, but I think quick action is better than slow action.
Let us, this would be kind of my thinking, Lynn, Mac, council, let us go and Lynn and Mac and I kind of talk. I think the desire to do some sort of restrictive is there from the council. Please object, council members, if you disagree. The question is on what we do and kind of timing, and it's probably let me and Lynn and Matt get together and talk about that. Perhaps there's some work that we're doing now internally we could contract out to help perhaps do something. There might be some options. So that would be my suggestion for that first benchmark of a success is let council, let staff get back, talk about timing, see if there's any way we can kind of speed that up perhaps, and come back to y'all with some ideas. How does that sound? Would that be it?
That's good.
Okay. Lynn, Mac, how does that sound to y'all? Does that make sense?
Yes, that.
Okay. And the second benchmark of success there, is everybody in agreement for that with the open space rewrite, the timing? Okay, great. Thank you, Lynn. Good job as always. So.
Yeah, thank you.
And Alex, I might have cut Lynn off. She may have had more there, just to be blunt, because I think I asked a question about that bullet.
Lynn, any other follow-up thoughts from you?
No, the only other information I had, we really kind of wrapped it up with the barriers in terms of just staff time and being limited with just the 160D rewrite, and then all the other projects we have going on in terms of plan review and just daily permitting and operation of the department keeps us very busy. So that was really, that's all I had left. But thank you, Mr. Ayers, for asking.
Awesome. Okay. I think economic development's next.
Hi, everybody. Can you see me in the slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, this seems to be something that's been on our mind really recently. As you guys know, we just brought you the economic plan draft from the Economic Work Committee. But as this was a priority of the council, we wanted to bring it to you again today to make sure you knew where we were and to make sure that you guys still held this in the same priority. So where we are is that the council charged an economic development working team to create a strategic plan. As you know, we then worked with the Monroe Union County Economic Development Director, Chris Platte, and that working group then came together to create a draft plan. And that draft plan was presented to you at our last council meeting. And I believe it will be up for consideration for adoption in March. So we just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that we still consider this a priority because you established it as a priority at our last planning session, and that we seem to be still on track unless you guys have some other direction that you wanted to provide staff on this. Don't everybody speak at once. So just making that assumption, just since we have all still talked, we just talked about it at the last council meeting, we'll move forward with this unless there are any barriers or any consensus on doing something different than what we spoke about at our last council meeting.
Aaron, if I could, I guess, what are some of the, and this is really to the group. I mean, a lot of what was presented at the last council meeting is kind of a strategy. I mean, what would be the next step in actually implementing that strategy? I mean, and we don't need to spend, just a couple of sentences there.
I might be able to take a shot at that, Stephen, and Brad and David and Aaron and Lynn, please jump in if you feel differently. But probably the thing we need to identify is how to get staff resources dedicated to implementing it. We've talked about several options. One of the things that we've talked about is potentially partnering with Union County's Economic Development Group, Chris Platte's group, and then bringing on a new person and that person dedicating X number of hours to implementing our economic development plan. So to me, that would be the first step, is figuring out how to dedicate funding to support the implementation work that's going to be necessary for that plan. So, thank you.
So another part of the economic development initiative was a priority by council. Well, and this listed some of the barriers, excuse me, I missed a slide here. Mr. Ayers, this listed a few of the barriers, was obviously implementation costs and funding sources. And then our action plan would to bring you implementation costs during budget sessions. So I think that kind of addresses also to what you were looking at. So it really comes down to a lot of times a budget issue. So we can bring some of those to you at the budget session. But another part of the economic development strategic plan that council was interested in doing was highlighting a business in the quarterly newsletter. This was something that came up at the last planning session last year that you guys were really interested in doing. And you held consensus to highlight a Stallings business in the quarterly newsletter. Your action plan was to let the mayor and council members be responsible for speaking with a particular business that you found in Stallings that you were interested in highlighting. And Mayor Dunn actually was volunteered to submit the first business for the newsletter. Unfortunately, as you guys know, right at that time, the pandemic hit. And since then, we have temporarily suspended our written newsletter just because of the timeliness of the newsletter and that our events and situations were changing rapidly. So this has been put on pause until we go back to the regular mailed newsletters. And as soon as we get that back on track after the pandemic, we will do this in our quarterly newsletter. We just wanted to make sure this again was still a priority that the council wished to do and have consensus on doing it in this manner.
I'm sorry, was that a question? Is this still a priority the way that it's worded?
Yeah,
here?
if council would like to continue to do this, we just wanted to bring it to your attention. We will still move forward with this as indicated, but we just wanted to consensus to make sure it's something you guys were still interested in.
mean, I think it's fine. I would just maybe point out, I'm sorry, fine is probably understating. I think it's good. I think it's part of that initiative one. I think that the subcommittee put together of highlighting and recognizing and getting to know businesses. So I would tuck it up under there if you needed a place to put it, not have it as separately.
That's a
In
good idea.
the only tweak I would suggest is maybe in the interim, as we're not providing those mailed newsletters, just do it as a digital format. Quarterly, put a business up on the Stallings, social media site and have like a 5-minute interview provided. I think that would be good.
We certainly
Businesses
can
love
do that.
publicity.
Yeah, we certainly can do that format if that's something the council is interested in doing.
All right, as a benchmark for success, I've got for this one then quarterly spotlight business, just doing it, putting it on social media until the newsletter starts back up. In agreement?
Sounds good.
And that covers that priority, Mr. Sewell. So we'll send it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ms. Nichols. Okay, also on our schedule for today, let me just pull this up here and pull up the schedule so we can just look at it together. So can everybody see the public agenda I've got up?
Yes, sir.
We're at almost at 11:35, so we could break for lunch now. And we had scheduled to come back at 12:15. The remaining priorities we've got, are the transportation priorities, which Mr. Easterly will run us through, the communication priority, and then the enhancing Blair Mill Park priority. So we've got on schedule to take a break now. We're on schedule, so we could potentially just take a break and not have a working lunch. What's the board's, or we could, take a quick, 20-minute break, let y'all get food and settled, come back and try to kind of work through the priorities and the miscellaneous discussion. We could potentially get out of here early today. What's the board's preference?
Working lunch.
Okay. I might suggest then, let's take maybe 20 minutes to go, let everybody get their food, get settled. And then at 11:55, come back, be ready to go, and we'll get started on transportation, and everybody can eat while we work. Does that sound good, everybody?
Just make it 12 noon.
Noon.
Rush, yeah, 5 minutes.
That's a very Alex thing to do, to set the time for 11:55 instead of noon. Yeah, sounds good. All right, we'll see everybody back at noon.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. Get back into it.
Yeah, let's see. I don't see Linda.
Okay.
Oh.
Give it another minute then. No worries.
There she is.
David, Heather, Stephen, John, Brad, Linda, White. All right. Chris, you ready to go too?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's get started.
Good afternoon, Mayor Dunn and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present on the council priorities that involve transportation. The two segments identified are continued participation in the technical coordinating committee staff component of the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, and updating the town's master transportation plan. Next slide, please. CRTPO is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the Charlotte urbanized area. CRTPO's mission is to provide, manage, and maintain a safe, efficient, and sustainable transportation system for all modes of travel in the region. To meet this mission, CRTPO will continually review and adopt the Unified Planning Work Program, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and the State Transportation Improvement Plan. To be an advocate for the transportation opportunities, plans, and funding that impact the town and the region. Attendance at these meetings is pivotal to ensure that the town is at the table for discussion and our voices heard. From the staff perspective, we have had 100% attendance at these meetings over the past year. Our goal is to continue to keep this metric. At this time, there are not any perceived barriers that would disrupt meeting this metric. To mitigate individual exposure during the current pandemic, the meetings are held virtually via Zoom. Next slide, please. During the 2011-2013 timeframe, the towns of Stallings and Matthews undertook the development of a transportation master plan together to ensure future plans for the area would support the needs of both towns. This plan serves as a guide to providing a coordinated, efficient, and economical transportation system for the region. The recommendations identified will provide safe and efficient facilities to support current and future land uses. This document has been incorporated in the region's Metropolitan Transportation Plan and allows these recommendations to be eligible for the physically constrained STIP. Next slide, please. The Transportation Advisory Committee was identified as the mechanism to begin the process of updating the Transportation Master Plan. Unfortunately, the pandemic suspended the ability for the group to meet. Next slide, please. The goal is to present a draft updated Transportation Master Plan to Council within 12 months of the TAC resuming meetings. The first action item for staff to undertake would be to develop a prioritization methodology based on a qualitative and quantitative factors such as level of service, safety, constructability, organ magnitude. There could be potentially up to 10 categories to consider and also to associate a weighing factor to these categories. Once that methodology is developed, staff will present to TAC for input and incorporate comments. Finalized methodology will be applied to the projects currently identified in the plan, and projects can be reprioritized. Subsequent to that, there could be a submittal to council, and the town can hold a public hearing for input from the residents. Next slide, please. Currently, there are a few barriers to this process. As stated before, the ongoing pandemic has suspended the opportunity for the TAC to meet. Staff can review methodology utilized in other plans for similar sized communities as a high level starting point for discussion. If the work continues in-house, this would be a large effort from the staff level in terms of time and resources to process this project. Large amount of data will have to be analyzed and processed. There could be potential partnership with a consultant or other municipalities can potentially be considered. Thank you. I can entertain questions.
The Silver Line virtual meetings. When's the one coming up for our section? Is it next week, next Wednesday or something? I can't remember. Did anybody have that meeting schedule handy?
Mayor, it's March the 2nd.
So that's Tuesday. Okay.
Tuesday.
Well, and I was going to say, with regard to transportation, there's so much here that is beyond our control that I know this is probably a little bit lesser priority for council than some of the other things we're trying to do right now with the economic development plan and the downtown action plan. But I think one of the most important things for us to do is to be out front and aggressive with supporting the Silver Line extension into Stallings. And, that will definitely at some point have a financial component to it, and it's not something the town of Stallings can do financially. So we need to somehow get the county commission on board with supporting this concept. And I don't think there's a lot of support there now. And I don't know exactly what we can do as a town. I know Indian Trail is also very interested in making sure that the line comes across the county line, so we could probably get some support there. But to me, that's with our own transportation planning, that's one of the, not one of, that's probably the most top priority. And then the other thing I was going to say with regard to transportation, Matthews has been a good partner for us in the past in working on transportation planning, and they've done some really smart things with trying to do some small projects that create some connection with other larger projects. And I think that's an opportunity for us to look at, maybe there's some ways that we could create some connections between Old Monroe Road and 74 that don't currently exist. I know the railroad is a big problem with that because of the fact that we can't get approval for any at-grade crossings. So it always involves a bridge, but there may be some other smaller projects where we could build connections, and maybe some of the roads in the small area plan for Idlewild. One of the things DOT was concerned about was that we had created 13 new connections, but some of those parallel roads to Stevens Mill that could create connections within the area there might be smaller projects that we could look at getting funded that would create a lot more connectivity for the town.
And I was just at the latest Western Union Municipality Association. I mean, they've all of those towns that are there have expressed their how do I say this nicely, lack of participation with DOT. And it seems like even since I've been on the board, and I'm kind of the newbie here, so I'm just kind of looking for feedback from everybody. It seems a lot to me since I've been here that DOT, I mean, if I was a business partner and DOT was a vendor of mine, they would have been fired long ago. Let's just put it like that there. So my question is to the group, I mean, is that a unexperienced person's point of view of DOT, or is that, does the rest of the council believe that? Or, I mean, it just seems like taking 10 years to do one project. I mean, I guess in the private sector, that would be laughed at, just to be blunt. And so my question is what does everybody else think about DOT and how they're performing their job duties to us as a town? Wow, I stunned everybody.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to touch that one. Well, I do think that, there are horizon years within DOT planning, and they do like a 50-year window and then a 10-year window, and then every 4 years the TIP is, well, actually I think it's reviewed more often than 4 years, but I mean, their model is very long range planning. And the biggest issues we've had, of course, is funding. So even though projects are planned to be delivered a lot sooner, if the money's not there to deliver them, they can't do it.
My problem is that if you are planning, doing all this planning, then it seems to me like part of that planning would include the funding side of it. I mean, to some extent.
And it does. The TIP is a fiscally constrained document, so there has to be funding associated with that. But then when the money isn't there, that's when things get shifted into a future year. And it's frustrating to me because I have worked with that CARPO board for a long time, and I can't tell you how many commissions have been established to look at replacement funding for the gas tax, because everybody knows the gas tax is dwindling and will do so even more in future years as we move away from gas powered vehicles. But nobody has ever presented a real plan that the legislature could act on to support or supplement that tax. And I mean, at our next meeting in March, we do have a report from the NC First Commission, which was the most recent board that's supposed to be coming up with alternatives. But whatever they present, the legislature has to agree to it through legislation. And this particular legislation has made a pretty strong commitment to no new taxes. So I'm not sure how successful the recommendations will be in getting supported by the legislature. I guess we'll all have to watch to see what happens there. I don't know if that really addresses your question. It sounds like an excuse. I mean, it's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating.
Well, like I said, I guess if I was in the position and they were an employee or a vendor of mine at Bank of America, they would have not be here anymore. We would have done a vendor research. They would have been given a written, we appreciate all the wonderful work and quality time that we spent together, but we've decided to go a different direction. And so, I mean, and I think that is a sentiment that is echoed across the entire, I mean, at least all of the towns that we're participating in with WUMAS. So I was just curious of what the council in general thought and whether or not that was consistent across the board. All right.
Yeah, they're a necessary evil, but there's no other vendor to go to. That's the problem. And you know, politics gets involved, as with it happened with Old Monroe Road. It was scheduled to be built start 2017, and here we are still waiting. So you got politics and funding, and then just have to work with them the best you can.
Well, I mean, and on that front, I mean, even with Potter and Pleasant Plains, when I inquired about that, I was told very quickly that it was politics involved there, that we come from a red area and that DOT was a blue area, and that we'll be lucky to get answers from, even if it's escalated up. So, I mean, it's very frustrating, and it's good to hear that it's frustrating to everybody. All right, I'll get off my soapbox, put it back in the corner.
Well, one other comment I would make too is that North Carolina has more roads than any other state in the union except Texas.
Mhm.
And the way things are set up now, I mean, it's all controlled basically by the state. The county's not involved in road construction at all. And that's not true in a lot of other places, apparently. But that puts maybe a little bit of perspective on the situation, because we do, I mean, DOT is not just for our area, it's for the entire state.
A lot of really good discussion and input. I wanted to kind of circle back around to the transportation master plan update. The benchmark for success we've got here would be kind of just to present the draft updated transportation plan to council within 12 months of the first TAC meeting. And it took, I think, Chris had shared with me, what, 18 to 24 months to do it originally. Is that right, Chris?
It's 24 months.
24 months, yeah. So we feel like this is an ambitious timeline. And we feel like using the Transportation Advisory Committee, that's an essential part of getting that initial public input in the framework of it. What do y'all think about this benchmark? Is that good? Does that make sense to y'all? Any opposition? Even though we haven't been able to meet, Transportation Advisory Committee staff want to do what we can on our end to be ready to hit the ground running when we're able to, whatever point that is in the future. So if there are no
reasonable plan.
Okay.
12 months is probably ambitious, but it's a good starting place.
It is, and maybe we could mark that as ambitious and a bit of a stretch goal, but let's try to do it. And another thing I'll mention too is how we update the format of our current plan. We're still kind of figuring that out, so there may need to be a little bit of funding to try to help us do that. We just need to kind of talk through that a little bit in the future. So nothing crazy though. All right, well, I'm assuming everybody's good unless I hear anything. All right. Well, if there are no other questions on this item, I believe Aaron, you're next with communications.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Council.
Hello again. Can everyone see the slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Stephen. So one of the priorities that council also identified last year was communications. And so I just wanted to share with you our current levels of service that we have with communications. First of all, we deal with the website overall content. And then we also have communication level service in our social media pages. For those of you who aren't aware, we have, of course, Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have Twitter. And then we also have some presence on Nextdoor. As you guys know, Nextdoor kind of works a little bit differently with certain radiuses and that sort of thing. But we do have a presence on Nextdoor as well. And then finally, we have the printed mailed quarterly newsletter, which we've already talked about, is paused at the moment just because of the pandemic, but we also provide that. So that is our current levels of service. If council wish to have additional levels of service in the area of communications, I just wanted to remind you, last year we did bring some costs for a communications position to the budget sessions last year, and that position was not funded. So if you wanted to increase the levels of service for communication and have someone devoted to that full time, we would bring to council the figures for an additional staff person during the budget discussions. So we're happy to answer any questions about the current communications plan at this time.
Hey, Aaron, it's John. Real quick, I would probably be more amenable to adding another staff member for communications specifically, but I think there'd be an opportunity to split the role a little bit and have someone focused on building what we can do to build a better sense of community. I know that's something the council's been working on off and on for the past decade.
Absolutely, and that has been a discussion. Everything from a combo from communications to ED to marketing. You know, communications and marketing are very different. So there has, we have had internal conversations about possibly, someone who can encompass those different types of areas as well, kind of all in one. So there's a lot of options for discussion there.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I guess the question I'd have, Aaron and Alex, as we think about adding a person, you asked, would we want figures? Now, I think so. I'd also like to know what level of service would we achieve with a new position? I mean, that would probably be intuitive. You'd provide that for me, but John's idea was good. We also talked about some staffing for business outreach, which is a little different form of communication, but just what would y'all recommend as a level of service we should get at? Several of our council members, John especially, Linda, do a really good job of communicating on social media. I don't very well, but so I look to the town to take that burden from me with information. So I'd like to know more about what level we should be achieving.
Absolutely. And when we bring you figures, we could talk about that, because there are, especially in local government, there's a lot of different areas that are kind of lumped into communications. First of all, as I was mentioning earlier, some towns have a marketing person. Some towns have a PIO, which is a public information officer, which is even a little bit different in the fact that person becomes the spokesperson for the town should, an issue arise. For instance, Indian Trail has a PIO, and her position is a little bit social media, communications, and then a little bit what we think of public relations for the town of Indian Trail. So there's a lot of different routes you could go if that's something that you're interested in. And along with the actual figures for salaries, we could bring you those different components and what all that would entail. Did I answer your question? Did I help?
It did. Thank you.
Sure. Any other feedback that we can take and possibly provide you some more information on this subject?
No, we just appreciate the work that you do. I mean, thanks for keeping everybody updated. And I mean, it's not just that, it's the graphics, the time to put together some of the graphics and details. Just a good job there, at least. And I've gotten feedback from people telling them that not only does the communications go out, but they look good, which I think level of professionalism.
Right. Well, and if there's anything else, if you have any other suggestions, please let us know. We're happy to always expound on those. I know some of you brought us the suggestion to push a little bit more about the light rail stuff, and we were happy to do that. So anytime you see information like that, we haven't necessarily grabbed onto, please let us know, and we'll be happy to get that out.
Aaron, how are we going to manage the?
David, I'm sorry, you went mute accidentally, I think.
All right. We have a new social media page, our YouTube page.
Yes.
With all of our, how are we going to manage that so that it also looks good?
Well, right now on that YouTube page is just the council meeting videos.
Can I share my screen?
Sure, absolutely. Let me unshare this one. There you go. I think you're on mute again, David. Just FYI.
Let me undo that. What do you guys see in there?
We just see.
Okay.
The Grand Canyon.
Good. This is what it looks like now.
Correct.
I think Wyatt beats me for the worst screenshot there. Sorry, Wyatt.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, what is that?
So
as you can see there, those are the newly uploaded.
Oh me, we gotta delete some of those.
no, we don't delete them, but Aaron, there's a real easy way to add a either a static picture or a frame within the video.
Okay.
I kind of figured we
like
could just add the town logo at the start of these things so that council doesn't look so funny.
I can definitely work on things like that. Absolutely.
Oh, I think it's a tie between Wyatt and John there.
Those were just uploaded last week per you guys' suggestion, and we working with the developers of our website to add a new link when you go to the council and minutes page. So it will link you directly to the corresponding video of that meeting. So as soon as that is done, I'll let you guys know that that's available on the website as well.
Thank you. I'm done. Oh, I'll stop.
Well, unless there's any other questions, we'll plan on bringing you guys some options along with specific, duties and responsibilities and salary to the budget discussions.
All right, great. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Great job, as always. Let's see, Miss Patz. Let's talk Blair Mill Park.
Hey, everybody, in case you forgot who I was from this morning. First and last, I like it. So council priorities included the general idea of enhancing Blair Mill Park. And just to kind of recap for some people who are newer on council, there have been many conceptual plans about Blair Mill Park, both prior to my arrival and since my arrival and through the master planning process. And what council's feedback was last year was we need to scale it back and look at some immediate improvements that we can do and things that we can get off the ground running, and concentrate on those, and then let that kind of drive our vision for it, instead of investing in a site-specific master plan for a multi-million-dollar park. It basically said, hey, look, let's step back. Let's think about it at, the micro level and see what we can do. And council awarded us or allocated some funds for improvements in this fiscal year. If you want to click to the next slide, kind of give you guys an update on what we've done with that funding. We removed the fencing, which was an eyesore that had started to fall down. We also had a company come out and remove tree and debris. It had become a dumping spot for people who would trim their trees in their yards. Then they would haul it over, after dark and kind of just throw it in the woods. So we actually had a gentleman come out with a specific type of equipment that instead of cutting the trees and hauling them off, it ground them down into mulch. And then we were able to use that mulch to enhance some of the areas that were holding water, specifically on the disc golf course. We'd had a lot of complaints of, hey, this hole's unplayable because it just has constant standing water. So it actually saved us a ton of money not having to haul the trees off. And we were able to repurpose that mulch to help with the disc golf course there. We've been working on tee box improvements, and we have some community helpers who have started to make handmade signs for the disc golf course, letting you know which direction you're supposed to play, where to cross, the best area to get to the next tee box. And that was kind of a surprise. It came out of our disc golf challenge that we did in November. Union County partnered with Indian Trail, myself, and SPCC to put together the Quad Creek Disc Golf Challenge. There were 289 participants and over 15,000 discs flown, but almost 5,000 of those were at Blair Mill Park. And we had by far the most players and the most popular disc golf course. So when we had that going on, we actually went out and did some citizen engagement to get some feedback on what kind of improvements, are the improvements we're making in line with, what is needed in the area. And those things, such as removing the old benches and adding new picnic tables, and we're on track to complete the restroom renovations before this summer, are all greatly appreciated by the community. And then we're also finalizing, now that we have the easement agreement with Vickery HOA, finalizing the design and engineering package to get ready for bid on the Vickery leg of the Blair Mill Greenway. those challenges, you guys have been here for them. We had to negotiate pretty hard with NCDOT. Took us a little longer than expected to get the engineering for the Hawk signal, and that was an additional cost that we weren't expecting. New equipment from Public Works, we had a little delay in that to get the Mini X, which we were using at Blair Mill to do some of these enhancements. And then we had some other construction projects, the shades in the playgrounds. We had the playgrounds completely rebordered and more mulch put in there. And then just the general staff availability when we were trying to split schedules and make sure that we maintain social distancing, times that we've had to quarantine people just because of exposure. But everything that we talked about doing for this fiscal year is well underway. And we're looking forward to the next year, which brings me to the next slide here. Our goal, our big takeaway benchmark would be complete construction of the Vickery portion of the Blair Mill Greenway by the end of fiscal year 21-22. And just as a reminder, this would be primarily using unspent park department funds from this year due to COVID savings from not having our events, and then our fee in lieu of park reserves. It's just kind of ambitious. What do you guys think? Hudson. Hudson approves.
Yeah. I think y'all can get it done.
Right.
Yep.
If we don't have all this rain, but should be good.
Well, and that just brings me to my last slide, which is looking towards the future of what enhancing Blair Mill Park looks like. I'd like to take a couple moments, get your feedback. We've gotten a lot of citizen engagement saying, hey, it would be nice if we could have this. I've heard from many of you council members, hey, what about this at Blair Mill? So I kind of just threw this out here as like an a la carte smorgasbord, just an idea generator of what could be some potential amenities or potential improvements to the park. But I'd really love to hear from you so that I can write them down and then come back to you at budget time and see if any of those things are things we want to add now or maybe add to the CIP for future years. So please shoot me ideas. And turn it over to you guys. Let me know what you think.
Well, actually, I had already written down, I was going to ask you about food trucks at the disc golf parking lot. Is that where you were thinking about putting the pad, or where would you put it?
Yeah, actually that so you're talking about the one that would be at it's past the bridge, correct?
Right.
Without the restrooms?
Right, across from Vickery.
Yes, that's what we kind of envisioned, was something there because there's not a lot on that side. And I think that where the parking lot meets the grass area there, it's mostly red clay. And so if we put a pad in there that food trucks could drive up to, it would help with two issues. One, it would make it look a little nicer because you can't grow grass on red clay. And then it would also be visible to people who are driving by, so they wouldn't have to turn into the neighborhood to get to the food truck.
You need bathrooms and or water available at that spot then?
Correct.
Can I ask a question about the redesign of the golf course? I know that has been brought up previously, and yet we hear wonderful feedback about that golf course and how popular and well liked it is. So why would we need to redesign it? I'm not sure I understand that.
That's actually a great question. So I live in Rock Hill, which is where the World Championship disc golf course is. And so I've gotten into the community of disc golfers around here, and many of them play our course. Our course is designed as a beginner entry-level course. People love playing it because they can succeed at it. When the course was built, some of the elements, it was all done by volunteers. The town purchased the holes and the baskets, but some of those were installed inside of like tires that are on top of rocks, and And some of them are in places where the basket needs to be a little higher or maybe move just a couple of feet. So we're not talking rip it out and do it over. We're talking, let's tweak it, and then maybe increase the difficulty level of a couple of holes. So it offers a new challenge. So it wouldn't necessarily say, okay, we're removing this completely and doing it all over. It would say, hey, where are the parts that through the disc golf community and people who actually use it say, you know what, we really would like if hole number 3 was about 20 yards longer, because that would give us more of a challenge. So we would just kind of tweak it a little bit. And some of that we've already done when we cleared out the trees, because our course wasn't meant to be a finesse course. So when you're trying to shoot through trees that are like leaning on each other, it kind of becomes difficult and people lose their discs. So we've already kind of done some of the redesign, including moving a tee box that was sitting underwater. So yes, not a complete rip out and redo, just some tweaks.
Understand. Thank you.
What about parking? Is there enough parking for both sides?
I would say the parking meets the current need. If we start to exceed that, then we could visit, what does that look like?
What about overnight parking?
We have had great success with dealing with the overnight parking through our code enforcement office. So what happens is a lot of the HOAs don't allow your commercial vehicles to be parked on the street, and people have their garages and driveways are full with their personal vehicles. So sometimes we get an occasional work van or work truck that's parked overnight. But Colleen does a really good job on her drive arounds about leaving a notice on there for them, and then following up, of course, if it continues to happen. If you see that it becomes an issue or something specific, please bring it up to us, because we drive out there every day, and we'll leave a little, our maintenance guys will leave a little sticky note. And then if it's still there when Colleen comes by, that's her trigger to say, hey, okay, I'm gonna look up the tag and send a letter.
But are you doing it at night?
Not currently. That's probably.
That's overnight parking.
All right, I'm writing this down.
And frequently when I go by later in the evening, 9, 10 o'clock, there's a couple cars in there.
Okay.
And trucks.
Give Colleen to give you a ticket book or whatever she uses.
Deputize me.
Yeah, he'd make you a deputy.
Hey, Ashley, back to the Greenway. I didn't quite have a question formulated, but I'm just trying to remind myself. So by June of 2022, we'll have the Greenway complete behind Vickery. Remind me, the only barriers to that might be weather, because am I correct that we've got that funded and the agreement with Vickery is signed?
Yes, so we went over the funding. It's actually been quite a while since we went through that with council, but Marsha put together a great presentation for us. With the money, we have like $375,000 in the fee in lieu of parklands, and then even adding the additional cost for the Hawk beacon, we were looking at worst case scenario, having $20,000 that we may have to pull from somewhere, which we still don't know what our cost savings are for this, going to be completely for this year. However, I'm recognizing that the project itself had a $95,000 contingency. So we felt pretty comfortable that, with the fee in lieu of parklands money that's come in and our cost savings from Stallings Fest and the concert series and, not expanding the Christmas lights this year, we're definitely going to be able to cover that. So it's just the process will be, bid, award the contract, and then get it on the ground.
And it'll terminate at what we used to call the Todd Acres project, the apartment complex behind Vickery. Any sense from Lynn on progress there?
There has been a new group who's purchased the property and intends to build the apartment portion of that project, which is where a lot of the greenway trails are located. They have a set of approved plans, but I think just like a lot of other projects right now in the county, the water and sewer situation is going to hold them up. But once they start construction, installation of those greenways, which will connect to the Vickery Trail, will be part of that phase, that apartment phase of the project.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder.
And on that note, we did propose in the Greenway Master Plan a wetlands boardwalk area that would continue that trail. Once you cross at the Hawk, it would continue into and back out between the two parcels there at Blair Mill, which it would eventually just, make a really nice connection between there and Idlewild Market. So this is not something that you have to decide on now, but before the budget process, if you have information or things that you want staff to look into cost-wise or options or how we could, further enhance Blair Mill Park, please get them to Alex, he'll get them to me, and then I'll just do the same thing, come back to you and say, hey, this is what you guys want me to look at. Do you want to do any of it this year? Do you want to do any of it next year? And we'll just keep trucking along.
Thanks, Ashley. Heather, you had mentioned perhaps enhancing the state of the turf as well. I wanted to make sure we captured that.
I don't know if it's possible, budget wise for y'all to get in contract with somebody who could really help with the grass over there. I mean, I know it's expensive, but it just looks unkept a lot. And I know that the soil is not great for growing grass, but it just, to me, sometimes the park looks like, I hate to say abandoned, but just, it's not appeasing to the eye. There's no landscaping, there's trash bags instead of trash cans, there's fire ants, it's nothing but weeds and no grass, it just doesn't look very nice. So anything would be a great improvement visually.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that. We used to have a landscaping contractor through the town that took care of Stallings Park, like trimming the bushes and things like that. So I reached back out to them, get them to do a site visit, see what they think, could recommend, and then I'll bring it to you guys. And just for the record, we do have trash cans on order to replace the trash bags. So that was part of the enhancements with this year's budgetary funding.
Okay.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Heather.
I think when things look nicer, people also treat them nicer. You know what I mean? Like visiting somebody's house, you're more apt to throw your stuff away or clear the table when you're visiting with somebody who keeps a nice house. I think it's the same thing with the parks. People might be less likely to litter and clean up after themselves if the park looks nice and kept.
Yeah, I think she's spot on, guys. I've been over to the park a few times. My kids have played the disc golf course. It'd be nice to have some really proactive talk about how to make it look like something we're proud of. I agree with Heather at this point. I don't know what it costs, but it's not a great park from a landscaping perspective. And that's what I think of a park. I think of that. So thank you, Heather, for bringing that up. I'd forgotten about that.
I got a quick question on that there, both for Heather and Brad. I mean, when I drive by there, one of the things is like, it's almost like the park, I hate to say we're almost ashamed of it, but we've kind of got a line of trees there that basically is a barrier to the park too. Yeah, I mean, it almost is like we're kind of trying to keep the vast majority of the park behind those trees. I mean, what do y'all think about that frontage there and how it's presented? Does that?
I like the idea of having trees and grass growing in a park. I don't want to cut down, but I think signage might help.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something else too. Okay.
Mr. Ayers, if I could address that, eventually the greenway will continue and the Stallings spine will run in front of Blair Mill Park. And I think eventually that will give you a better aesthetic from the curb side, at least, because it will be that Stallings spine, which is the wider path, the 14-foot path with the the imprinted brick layout. So it'll eventually look really nice there. And then the other thing about the crossing there is definitely going to, on the side with Vickery, there will be a trailhead there with a very nice greenway sign from the Greenway master plan. And I'm hoping to get pictures of what that looks like for you from the Solus project so that you can see this is what the park signage actually looks like in person. So there is also the opportunity to do that kind of monument sign for Blair Mill to kind of be more attractive there.
Okay. I mean, sometimes it's easier, and Ashley and Alex, I don't want to take any negativity. I mean, sometimes it's easier to say what isn't working than what is working.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great feedback, and we can look and get some prices and come back and continue the conversation during budget time.
I mean, I think it still remains a priority. It is the park that serves that part of our community, so it should remain a top priority of council, in my opinion. So yeah, let's just continue every year to make it better.
I think, I mean, one of the things is that I think we've got one park that wins accolades every year. And then I guess things that I've heard from that side is just, it feels like there's a little bit of an imbalance there because again, folks see it as Stallings Park is getting accolades and a lot of updates and things like that there. And I guess it's not easy to answer the questions on why it doesn't feel like there's a balance there.
Well, Stephen, that's a good point. The imbalance is about $3 million. So, yeah.
and I know that, and you know that. I'm just giving feedback on what I hear.
Oh yeah. So that's what I tell people. Yeah, if we got another $3 million, we'll put it in Blair Mill. So
I've got on my list for things to explore, Ashley. Let me know if you've got anything different. I heard something on the food truck pad, looking at that, enhancing the grass, turf, and landscaping. And did I hear enhanced signage over there?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's any signage.
There's not any signage. There's a rule sign for the disc golf course, but there isn't any identifying signage to let you know this is Blair Mill Park in the town of Stallings.
Yeah, it'd be nice to put our logo and it doesn't have to be a monument sign, a big expensive thing. It could be just something that looks nice. That doesn't have to cost a fortune. 2 of them really for both entrances.
all righty. Thank you, Ashley.
And then the other thing I had was overnight parking. I'm going to look into that. That's the only other thing, Alex.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. Great job.
I just want to say that to David's point about cars being there at nighttime, I often get home from work around 10 o'clock. So when I come home, a lot of times there is a Stallings police officer there to check things out and be sure that everything is safe at nighttime there. So, I think we definitely appreciate that the officers have a presence over there checking on everything.
All right, it's good feedback. Good job, Chief, you and your team. So really, if there's nothing else, we've run through all the priorities, y'all. I'll kind of, again, on that same meeting on the 22nd, when I bring back the downtown tweaked action plan, I'll do the follow-up with these, bring them to y'all for y'all's final approval, right, on where we're at and where we're going. And now we're at the portion of the retreat. Let me pull up the schedule here. We had a break scheduled, and as you can see, we're ahead of schedule. And then we've got the portion for miscellaneous discussion. This is the opportunity for the board to talk about anything else. Perhaps the DOT discussion that I so rudely cut off earlier. Appreciate y'all, Lyndon and Stephen, y'all allowing me to do that. And then anything else that y'all might have that you want to talk about and bring up. So I guess the options are we could take a brief break and come back, or we could keep rolling into the miscellaneous discussion.
Let's keep rolling. My vote.
Well, roll on, finish early.
Great. All right.
Who had the under? Did you have the under, Alex?
The casino wasn't open for this one. We should have.
Wait, can you give me 1
I would have
minute?
taken the over.
Can I just get 1 minute before y'all start discussing something?
We're timing you. Go.
Okay, 1 minute.
Oh, she needs to leave. Oh, I thought she had something else.
So did Stephen and probably Brad.
Oh, are we losing a bunch of people?
And Alex. Brad's back. He
No,
was
I just
quick.
think she had to go to the bathroom for a minute. That's what she's doing.
Oh, we figured you did too.
No, I just
All right,
got my
old
screen
bird.
off so I could stand up.
Because he's not wearing pants. He's wearing shorts.
David, you played Divide lately?
No, I haven't played. It's been so stinking wet and or cold. But golf practice starts Monday. I've been over there on the practice green and stuff lately, though.
I was just wondering how the greens were looking.
They are warm weather grass, so they went dormant in the fall, and they're dormant now. They're not bad, and most of them are not bad, but some of them aren't at all taken off yet because they haven't had any heat.
All right,
Like,
so they need some heat. All right.
putting green is probably one of the worst. It looks, if it didn't have really nice sand on it, it would not be fun. I mean, fine sand that putts, it still putts true, but
Dave, while we're waiting, what's that pile of green sand
that's
sitting
the
in
green
the-
sand that goes on the greens.
Ah.
It's really, really fine.
Gotcha.
And it
Okay.
blends in, and it blends into the soil too.
Okay. I've always been curious about that. So,
The white sand goes in the bunkers.
yeah. Kind of looks like grass seed on actually, but with all the rain, it would be one big pile of grass.
Yeah. When they trimmed up the old greens, they had piles of Bermuda grass cut up into like sod shaped shapes, little squares and rectangles.
Uh-huh.
And they left a pile of it right out my back between my house and the golf course in the woods. And I'm like, that stuff's going to be nice. Plus, it's got about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of soil underneath it.
Yeah.
So I got to haul it back up into my yard because I have garbage yard soil. We're all here.
Oh, Heather's back. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I'll kick it off. I got a few things. I won't dominate. I'll say a few and then wait and finish them up. This is one idea that I've been thinking about for a couple of years, and then I researched it of how many towns are doing it around the country, and there's quite a few. I mean, there's a ton of towns that give a tax credit to their elderly citizens over 70 years old. And I don't know how it'll look, how much it would cost. I asked Alex, could we get that data? And it would be hard. So it'd just be something you could get from census data or something like that. But think about that, giving a tax credit to our folks, senior citizens that are over 70 years old. As I said, you can research it and see how many towns are doing it. It's from small towns to large towns are doing it. So The second thing I wanted to bring up, the hospital contacted me, and they are due to COVID, their revenue is not as much as as it used to be. And so they've asked us, can they delay the road improvements that they were going to make to Smith Farm and Gribble by a few months. I told him, I said, well, if the CEO didn't make $30 million a year, maybe he can spend some of his money to build a road. But I find it hard to believe they don't have the money. But so they've asked us for that delay. They've contacted Alex on this subject as well. So if you want any questions on any details, talk to Alex. But we need to make a decision on that and let them know what's going on. Ashley, are you still on?
Yes, sir.
Hey, great job on the park this Christmas. Any way to another time that we had a great looking park during Christmas was when the HOAs all did a Christmas tree, and it lined the the park. And so I don't know if we can do that for this coming year or not, but just an idea if you would consider it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And then Aaron, the banner that goes around the, or maybe this is a Public Works or Alex, the banner that goes around the substation at Stevens Mill and Idlewild, is that, are we still going to do one for spring, or what's the status of that?
Mayor, and I'll follow up. We should be, yes, sir.
Well, I didn't know whether we had a torn banner or something like that, but I just had quite a few people talking to me.
If Alex is all right, I can answer that too a little bit. We did have a banner that got blown down and torn, so we had to remove it. And I think a part of it may have gone missing on a real windy day back around Christmas, but we will be putting the spring one back up.
Well, that's what I figured, but I just wanted to get a clarification. Let's see. Can we talk about your email on Friday about the Poplin Road sewer capacity?
Sure.
And how that affects Stallings? Could you give us a little bit more detail on that, Alex?
Sure, absolutely. It came, let me give you the background of why it came up. And let me kind of pull up my records. Give me count to 10 and I'll be ready here. So it came up because a developer had approached us and had said, the county's not giving us our water accessibility letter, which is one of the requirements the town has before we give approval to the construction preliminary plat stage of the development process. So we're at the stage after council has they've gotten all their approvals from council and the engineering and design and all that good stuff. What's going on essentially is the county at the Poplin station, it sounds like they're out of capacity essentially. And there's a capital project that's on the books. It's called the Poplin Pump Station. And they're in the property acquisition phase of it. And so from the county's told us it's going to be between 18 to 24 months before that is completed from property acquisition, once that's complete. So it's going to be a year and a half, 2 years, most likely at the soonest before that's completed. And what's happening is I think the developers are, hitting a brick wall with wanting to get started. And we're just starting to see the beginning stages of where the decreasing sewer capacity of the county is having an effect on the ground with development. So the developer at issue, they approached the town staff and said, hey, would you let us start vertical construction? We talked about it on Friday with Mac. And if we haven't responded to it yet, our response is going to be, no, you cannot. You've got to have the water accessibility letter before you start. In addition, we're drafting a resolution that's going to come before the council, likely on the March 8th council meeting. We think we're good. We've got the full authority to do this, but we want to add another resolution just to, remove all doubt, because what we don't want to get into is a situation where we're allowing a developer to start, and then you've got half-built infrastructure which causes problems, and they're turning around and pointing the finger at the town and potentially filing lawsuits and exposing us to liability.
Yeah, that's always a bad situation.
Yes, sir. So I think the county is struggling with what to do with this situation as well, not just from the sewer issue, but also in the role that they play in administering, construction in the county area outside of the towns. And so I think they're going to draft a process that's going to go before the county commissioners on March 11th at that meeting and discuss further with their board. So.
All righty. Well, thank you, Alex.
Yes, sir.
The last thing I got is y'all saw an email from Alex, I believe, talking about the census has been delayed and it might affect our ability to have our elections in November. And they're still mulling it over and trying to make a decision. I don't know how that affects us, but I'm totally opposed to that. In the town of Stallings, we did our own reorganization of the districts in 2017, just 4 years ago. And so I don't think we need to be penalized and for the census lack of ability to get their data done. I don't know what the cause of the delay is, but it's typical government asking for an extension, our federal government. And so I certainly don't think it should affect us. And I don't know what recourse we have. That's why I copied Dean Art, since this is a state decision. So just want to let you know that, my thoughts on that we did, y'all that weren't on the council, we did redistrict in 2017. So that's all I got.
I thought the redistricting was much earlier in the 2010s.
Yeah, when they split up Shalimar and you had to run against Rocky, that was, when it was done.
Oh, no, as I remember it, my memory's not the greatest. We'd have to look it up, but I took Walt's seat. He was grandfathered into his district, and I took his seat, and the new district didn't become effective until his seat became a new seat, which was when I had to run. So in 2017, or before 2017, I was in Walt's old district, which was grandfathered to him because you guys the council didn't make you split up until you were off the council. So in 17, I had to switch over to new district, which was against Rocky.
Right, and that's when it was effective. Well, that's the election that affected, right?
Yeah. So because Walt was not there, who was the grandfathered council member.
All right, anybody else? That's all I got. Alex, thanks.
Just real quick, one of the things I'm seeing is that we've got some opportunity to pay more attention to some of the granulars that'll impact decisions going forward. Just little things like, when these new communities are built, having the right signage, the signage that complies with the standard we want for your road signs and stuff. Fences, I noticed that Southstone's got up those old road signs. Plus they also are gas stations putting up fencing, chain link fencing around their stuff that is just going to be an eyesore right there on Stevens Mill Road. And the CZ coming up too, we're putting in a $200 million hospital, and right across the road we've got a business, and Lord knows we want to help our businesses. At the same point in time, we've got a business across from a $200 million hospital with Constantine wire up around a chain link fence, and it just kind of it doesn't lend well to the vision and image we're trying to build here in Stallings. So
Agree. A comment from me, and this is back toward the priorities and maybe a sub bullet under, I don't know where you put it, Alex, but if I remember, I think the goal today was to reaffirm those priorities. And I'd like to, before we go, I'd like to just have you run down that list again, so I'll make sure I know where they are. One of the things that I've wondered related to communication, and that is just our processes, land development that come through the planning board, planning committee, and then on to council. I have never met our planning board, and I don't know if that's unusual or I haven't done something on my part. I've been to planning committee meetings, but one of the things that's concerned me is I've sat here for 2 years, and it's not a big concern because I know that the council always sort of is the one who answers to the citizens from an electoral standpoint. But there have been several cases where the planning board would either, the point is that they would approve something unanimously or 5-1 with maybe Rocky or somebody dissenting. And yet it would come to the council and it would be almost like the planning board was their opinion was dismissed. And dismiss is too strong of a word. I don't know the other word. A recent example was Monday night with the rezoning, the text amendment. Again, and this comment now is not about the text amendment. I want to be more broad than that. To me, I don't know if it falls under communication. That felt more citizen related, communicating social media and website. But I've felt like there's a disconnect between coordination of priorities and goals and land use and vision plans and all this stuff with the council and the planning commission or board or whatever we call it. It might be just me, but to me, that's a problem where we've got maybe a committee that isn't on the same page as the council. I just want some clarity. Is that something that's a problem in anyone else's eyes, or is it just a fact of how the system works? So don't know if that falls under any of those priorities. So it may not, it may just be an ad hoc item for me to do a better job of getting to know them myself. But coordinating between this body and that body seems to be important. And or do we have the right folks on it? I have been impressed with a lot of the discussion that I've sat in a couple meetings this year. I have also been disappointed in the level of discussion on a couple of items I thought deserved a little bit better discussion or broader or more robust. So I'm trying to put that nicely. Do we have the right expertise on the planning committee that we need as well?
I agree.
I'll put that out there for. Well, I'll give you my 2 cents, Brad.
Please.
I've been a planner. I've been on the planning board, and now I've been on the council. And certainly it's frustrating to the planner, Lynn, but when I was a planner, when I submit a plan that I'd done 6 months worth of work, and then the planning board approves it, and then it goes to the council and doesn't get approved. So it is frustrating to everybody. But when now that I've seen all 3 levels, the planning board's function is their focus is a lot less broad than the council's. So they're looking at the planning details that meet the requirements of the codes and the ordinances in the town. And then, of course, the council is looking at the big picture, whether funding, how it affects, the town as a whole. So that's, it's the nature of the beast, but their focus is more on the nuts and bolts of the planning part, and they're not looking at the big picture. That's my take. Somebody could have a different opinion.
Yeah.
And I agree, Wyatt. Their job is to put a different set of eyes on it. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. And we have the bigger picture and are thinking of different outcomes or different, just the bigger picture. And we sometimes have a difference of opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. And as I tell them and tell other people that I've listened to their advice, I said, I appreciate your advice, but sometimes I see it differently, and I'm the one that has the final call as we do. And these differences will happen. It doesn't happen all the time at all, but it does happen occasionally, and that's okay.
But I think too, to your question, Brad, about the level of expertise, there are not any qualifications for serving on the planning board other than living in the town. And we historically have had difficulty attracting people to serve on all of our boards, not just the planning board. The planning board is probably the most popular board that people do volunteer to serve on, but I think possibly we could do a little better job of trying to find people in the community who have certain skill sets that might enhance the functioning of the planning board as well as other boards. And that has been a difficult lift to do.
We have 2 former council members on it right now who I fully trust to be able to help guide them in what our processes are at the council level and help them do a better job at their level.
Who's the other council member?
Shauna and Rocky.
Who?
Shauna and Rocky.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I do get the mayor, I get your distinction. That was a good one to make. So it may not rise to any sort of actionable items. I'll withdraw that as a motion to do anything. I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, my other point is, to me, it's a good training ground to get people to run for council. I mean, John was on the planning board, and I'm sure it was valuable for him to know how that worked and then to join the council. So that's why we got to make sure we have the right people on the planning board, you know, whether they agree or disagree with our point of view, just make sure they're critical thinkers and can understand the subject matter. All right, thank you, Brad. Anybody else? Stephen, you better have some topic.
Trying to be nice, man. We're trying to be nice.
Well, I know. Well,
I've said some of my piece as we've gone along. So
well, we made fun of you sitting in that recliner, and everybody else is sitting in chairs. So I want to give you a chance.
I know. I'm, and I don't even have the reclining feature. It's all. I mean, like I said, we went. He's got the nice one. It's all electronic and everything.
All righty, Alex, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Mayor. With that being said, we don't have anything else. We got done early, so I'll plan on, unless there's any other discussion, I'll plan on following up on the 22nd, which is some general follow-up information, some ideas, action strategies, and just to recap. And on that meeting on the 22nd, I'll probably ask for any feedback from y'all, things you liked about the retreat, things you didn't like. So would ask you to be thinking on that so we can make sure, for future retreats, we're always improving. So thank you all.
It said we were meeting at the golf course next year. And at the break, we were do like maybe 4 holes or something like that there.
We'll meet at the disc golf place. Yeah, we'll do some holes there. That'd be
there. You
fun.
go.
Never done that. That would be interesting.
Well, Alex,
Make sure to have a food truck.
Yeah, Alex and Aaron, thank you all for putting this together and your time and efforts. And it was certainly beneficial to me. So I hope it was to the rest of the council, but thank you all very much for your efforts.
And staff giving up your Saturday also.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take it easy.
Hi, y'all.